Mother of twins reappears after 5 years, shocking a millionaire CEO by revealing the twins and triggering a life-altering twist for a man who thought he had it all. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel, and let's get started. The private jet's engines hummed softly against the dawn sky as Camille Johnson, a poised and elegant black woman of 28, stepped onto the tarmac. In each hand she held a small, excited boy. Twins with warm brown skin, their dark curls neat and eyes filled with curiosity. These were her 5-year-olds, Miles and Mason, the secret she had held onto for so long. As she descended the jet's steps, the airport staff looked on with discreet awe. It wasn't every day that a young mother arrived in such style, especially one with an unreadable expression that balanced fear and determination. On the horizon, the city shimmered in early light. It was here that Alexander Knight, the brilliant millionaire CEO of Knight Innovations, was preparing to marry his fiancée in what society columns had called the wedding of the decade. Camille could still recall the smooth timbre of Alex's voice, the way he used to laugh when they spent long evenings discussing possibilities. 5 years had passed since she vanished from his life, pregnant and unsure if she could trust him with her heart. She had run away, forging her own path, determined never to look back. But circumstances had changed. Clutching the twins' tiny hands, Camille took a deep breath. This was the day she would reveal everything. She was prepared for an onslaught of emotions, anger, confusion, maybe even betrayal. Yet she also hoped that the man she remembered, the one who once looked at her with unguarded tenderness, could see past her secret. The children's father had no idea they existed, but that was about to change. "Mama, is this Daddy's city?" Miles asked in a half-whisper, his big eyes scanning the bustling runway. Camille knelt to his level, brushing away the boy's hair. "Yes, sweetheart, but remember we need to be brave. We'll meet him soon, you'll see." Mason, the more observant twin, squeezed Camille's other hand. "Is Daddy going to like us?" he asked, voice trembling. It wasn't the first time the question had come up. Camille felt her heart tighten. She'd tried to prepare them for any outcome. "He'll love you," she reassured softly, hoping it was true. From the corner of her eye, she noticed movement. A suited driver approached with polite caution. "Ms. Johnson?" he asked, bowing slightly before opening the car door. "Your vehicle is ready." Camille ushered the children inside, her mind already racing with the knowledge that Alexander Knight was most likely at his penthouse or en route to the wedding venue. What would he say when he saw her? Would he resent her for the secrecy, or would the fatherly instinct overshadow any hurt pride? There was no turning back now. For 5 years, her life had been shaped by independence, launching her own design business, raising the twins alone in a foreign city. But a recent financial crisis forced her to face the reality. The children deserved the chance to know their father, and she needed Alex's help to keep their futures secure. The limousine ride toward the city's upscale district was quiet, save for the boys' muffled curiosity as they pressed their noses to the windows. Mansions, tall mirrored skyscrapers, and elegant boulevards slipped by. Camille's phone buzzed with a message from her old friend, Tasha, who had worked as Alexander's personal assistant once upon a time. Tasha was the only person who knew Camille was coming, and why. Her text read, "He's at the Grand Astoria, finalizing wedding details. You need to hurry before the ceremony starts." Camille's heart pounded. The wedding was mere hours away. She remembered the tabloids' relentless coverage. Alexander and his fiancée, the daughter of a prominent senator, were the talk of every social circle. Everyone admired Alex for his unstoppable ambition, but no one seemed to know of the nights he once shared with Camille, confiding his dreams and heartbreaks. The chauffeur quietly announced their arrival at the Grand Astoria, a lavish hotel with glittering chandeliers visible even from outside. The sun was higher now, casting reflections off the gold-trimmed windows. Paparazzi and media vans lined the entrances, eagerly awaiting glimpses of the city's elite. Inside the car, Camille's nerves spiked. Taking a shaky breath, she pushed down her doubts. "Miles, Mason," she said, turning to them. "Stay close to me. We're about to meet a lot of people." The doorman's eyes widened at the sight of the glamorous mother and her identical twins, but he kept his composure. "Welcome to the Grand Astoria," he said with a polite smile, opening the door grandly. Camera flashes quickly followed as curious onlookers whipped around to see who this striking arrival could be. Camille held each child by the hand and swept across the polished marble lobby, ignoring the sudden hush of whispered speculation. She approached the reception desk, politely asking for the rooftop suite where the wedding preparations were said to be happening. The clerk, after a moment's shocked recognition, escorted them to a private elevator usually reserved for VIPs. The elevator ride was excruciatingly silent. Camille recalled the day she left 5 years ago. She'd been just a nobody in the eyes of many, an upcoming fashion designer from a modest background, teased by the rumor mill for being too ordinary for Alexander Knight. Her departure had been fueled by heartbreak and the fear that no one, not even Alex, would stand by her once the truth came out. And now, ironically, she was returning in front of the entire city's high society. When the elevator doors slid open on the top floor, a burst of activity revealed florists, stylists, and event planners rushing about. The hall reeked of extravagance, giant bouquets of roses, gold-framed mirrors, luxurious carpets. Camille's heart almost failed her then, but Miles and Mason, oblivious to the tension, peered around with wide-eyed fascination. "Excuse me, madam," a frazzled event coordinator said, nearly bumping into them with an armful of white lilies. "Are you with the bride's entourage?" Before Camille could respond, a familiar voice called out from behind. "Camille!" Tasha, clad in an elegant black dress and an earpiece, rushed forward. Relief flooded her face. "I've been worried you might change your mind," she said softly, noticing the twins. "They're adorable. This is happening, isn't it?" Camille nodded, trying to keep her composure. "Yes. Where's Alex?" Tasha led them through a set of ornate double doors into a lavish suite. Inside, half a dozen groomsmen lounged, nursing fancy cocktails and checking their tuxedos for last-minute adjustments. But Alexander Knight wasn't among them. The suite's windows offered a panoramic view of the city's skyline, and in the distance, the wedding arch was set on an expansive rooftop terrace. White chairs and floral arrangements dotted the space, shining under the morning sun. The gossiping men fell silent when they saw Camille and the children. She noted their stunned looks. Some of them recognized her from years ago, others simply stared at the twin boys. One of them opened his mouth to speak, but Tasha raised a hand, halting any questions. A door at the far end of the suite opened, and there he was. Alexander Knight stepped out, dressed in a sharp black tuxedo, a delicate white rose pinned to his lapel. His hair, always neat, was brushed back with a hint of silver at the temples that hadn't been there 5 years prior. He carried himself with commanding confidence, but the moment he locked eyes with Camille, time seemed to freeze. The men behind him fell away into the background. Alexander's expression morphed from confusion to shock, and then to something Camille couldn't identify. Maybe longing. Maybe regret. His gaze flicked to the boys, noticing the identical set of chocolate-brown eyes and the same shape of eyebrows. Mirrors of his own. A hush fell upon the suite. Even Tasha seemed to hold her breath. The twins clutched their mother's hands tighter, unsure of the man who stared at them with such intensity. Finally, in a voice nearly too soft to hear, Alexander spoke. "Camille? What? Who?" She swallowed hard, stepping forward, her heart pounding so loudly she could hardly think. "Alex," she said, gently placing a hand on each child's shoulder. "I need you to meet someone. Actually, 2 someones." Miles, curious and innocent, peered up at the man who looked suspiciously like him. "Are you my daddy?" he asked, voice quivering with a mix of hope and fear. Alexander blinked in disbelief. His normally unflappable facade cracked. He glanced at Camille, the heartbreak and betrayal flickering across his features. Then he slowly knelt to the twins' eye level. The groom's suite, the florist's, the entire wedding day outside those glass doors seemed to fade away in that moment. Everything hinged on Alex's next words. "Your mother? Never told me," he began, voice trembling. He looked up at Camille again, searching for answers in her eyes. Behind them, Tasha and the groomsmen exchanged shocked glances while staff outside hammered away, finalizing last-minute details for an opulent wedding that now hung in the balance. The question echoing silently in everyone's mind: would Alexander Knight abandon his bride-to-be on the very morning of his wedding to face the greatest revelation of his life? Twin sons he never knew existed? Under the dazzling sunlight beaming through the suite's windows, Camille found her voice. "I'm sorry, Alex. I had no choice. Until now." He rose slowly, 1,000 unspoken emotions boiling beneath the surface. She braced herself for anger, accusations, or even indifference. But instead, Alexander placed a trembling hand on each child's shoulder. The hush in the room deepened. Tears that he tried to suppress glistened in his eyes. "Miles and Mason," he said, voice gentler this time, I'm your father." The children exchanged uncertain looks. Then Miles offered a tentative smile, and Mason's eyes welled with tears, perhaps from the intensity in the room or simply from meeting a father he'd only imagined. In the background, the world marched on. The wedding planner's frantic calls, the whir of cameras outside, the city's hum, and a bride no one had yet seen. But for Alexander, Camille, and the twins, it was as if the universe paused. Their story, interrupted so many years ago, had abruptly resumed, forcing them all into a reckoning with the love, pain, and secrets that had lain dormant for too long. To the onlookers, it was a moment of hushed astonishment. But for Camille and Alexander, it was the spark of a future that might still hold the promise of healing. Only time would tell if this was the grand reunion they both unconsciously desired, or the beginning of even greater turmoil. Camille stood absolutely still, watching as Alexander gathered the twins in an unsteady embrace. For a fleeting moment, she believed she saw the man she once knew, the one who had laughed with her under the glow of city lights, whispering dreams of a future they might share. Now, though, the hush inside this gleaming penthouse suite was edged with panic. Groomsmen in impeccable suits looked on, too shocked to speak. Tasha, trembling, covered her mouth with one hand, her eyes reflecting a swirl of compassion and dread. Time stretched taut. "Daddy," Miles repeated gently, testing the word on his tongue as if he couldn't believe he was allowed to speak it. His little voice punctured the quiet. Across the suite, staff members carrying rose bouquets paused mid-stride, curiosity sparking in their eyes. A drama far more potent than any wedding decor was unfolding right here. Alexander cleared his throat, trying to steady himself. His usually composed face betrayed him, raw and open. "Yes," he managed to say, glancing from one twin to the other. I am." A single tear escaped Mason's eye. He stared at the father he had never known, face half hidden behind his brother. The two of them, so identical yet distinct in personality, cast anxious glances at Camille. Alexander's fiancée was nowhere to be seen, but the reality of her arrival at any moment drummed in Camille's thoughts. She had been so fixated on telling Alexander about the children that she had only half acknowledged the magnitude of his wedding day. Now, beneath the opulent glow of crystal chandeliers and tasteful portraits, the enormous significance of it all hit her. No matter what bitterness might boil up, no matter the pain of the past, she could not walk away this time. Miles and Mason needed the father that fate had denied them. Even more complicated, she herself couldn't deny the rush of emotion at seeing Alexander again. Those same intense dark eyes, that regal poise that had once made her believe in fairy tales. Camille? Alexander released a shaky breath as he rose, letting his arms slip from the twins' shoulders. The children pressed closer to Camille for reassurance. Why would you keep them from me? Her mouth went dry. All eyes in the suite turned to her. She wondered whether to fling the entire truth at him, how his high-powered socialite mother had once warned Camille that she was unworthy, how the family's circle of investors and politicians had begun to swirl in rumors and gossip the moment Alex got serious with some small-town girl. She recalled the last argument they'd shared. Yes, his frustration had soared. Yes, there were words so stinging they felt like blades. Terrified that she was only an accessory to him, she had left. And in that chaos, she discovered her pregnancy. Fearful that Alexander, still wrestling with corporate battles, would be forced into fatherhood, she vanished overseas to build a stable life for her unborn children. It's complicated, Camille managed, voice hushed. I was scared. I didn't know if you would welcome them, or if you even truly wanted me in your life. His face reflected a hurt more vivid than anger. Camille, you... He paused, conflict raging in his eyes. To the side, Tasha swiped at tears, whispering hasty apologies for not telling him. We could have figured it out, he said finally. We could have done something. Nearby, the groom's best man cleared his throat, glancing apprehensively toward the corridor leading to the bridal suite. Alex, maybe we should... But the sentence died off. He, like the others, was uncertain about how to handle this emotional upheaval on the morning of such a public, high-profile ceremony. Suddenly, a commotion in the hallway. The door parted, revealing the silhouette of Elizabeth Grant, Alexander's fiancée, flanked by two sharply dressed bridesmaids. She wore a flowing ivory robe, hair pinned up in a style that suggested the breathtaking wedding gown was only moments away. Her expression flashed from confusion to shock and then hardened into icy fury as her gaze locked on Camille, then on the twins. The entire suite felt the temperature drop. "Alexander," Elizabeth said, her voice trembling with contained anger, "what's going on here?" She let out a disbelieving laugh, though there was no humor in it. "Who is she and—" Her eyes landed on Miles and Mason. "Who are they?" Alexander's chest rose and fell, a storm of guilt and paternal love swirling inside him. Before he could answer, one of Elizabeth's bridesmaids tugged at her elbow, whispering something about their schedule, about how the final ceremony arrangements were waiting. Elizabeth shook the bridesmaid off and took a rigid step forward. Camille felt the twins' grip tighten, and she instinctively placed a protective arm around them. Her heart hammered. She knew Elizabeth had reason to be upset. Any bride would be furious, blindsided by the sudden appearance of not just an ex, but an ex bearing children from a secret relationship. Trying not to show the vulnerability coiling inside, Camille spoke in a polite but steady tone. "I'm Camille Johnson," she said. "These are my sons." Elizabeth's gaze narrowed. "Your sons?" She paused, her eyes flicking to Alexander. He stood like a statue, the color drained from his face. "Oh my God," she hissed. "You had children with her?" "I didn't know," Alexander insisted, stammering. "Elizabeth, I found out just now. They just arrived." Elizabeth's lip trembled as she surveyed the twins. They looked so much like Alexander, something any onlooker would notice. A hush settled again, but this time tension sizzled beneath the surface. The bride pressed her nails into her palm, stifling either tears or an explosion of rage. Possibly both. Camille braced for a flood of scorn, but Elizabeth's anger found a target in Alexander first. "And you never told me anything about this?" she asked, voice cracking. "You always insisted you and that old flame ended on quiet terms. And now, look at what's happening on our wedding day." She let out a shaky, disbelieving exhale, trying to regain her composure. "This is humiliating." Alexander reached for her arm, but she jerked away. "I promise I didn't know," he repeated. "You know I wouldn't lie to you about this." Her gaze darted back to Camille, who stood in simple yet tasteful attire, just sophisticated enough to command a certain respect. Miles and Mason were clinging to her, wide-eyed. They seemed petrified to see their father talking to a woman who all but seethed with hostility. Finally, Elizabeth exhaled a trembling sigh, her anguish spiking into pointed words. "You want me to believe she just happened to drop in on your wedding day with your children? You think that's a coincidence?" She eyed Camille with a contempt that made Camille's spine go rigid. "Are you trying to ruin him? Looking for a payout? Because it's not going to work. We're in the middle of a merger and an orphan scandal." She stopped, pressing a hand to her mouth, though it was clear she meant every bit of what she'd said. "They aren't orphans," Alexander said sharply, voice edged with anger at the suggestion. "They're my sons." A tearful bridesmaid tried to coax Elizabeth from the suite, whispering that they still had time to salvage the schedule, that the wedding coordinator was waiting. Elizabeth shook her head, not budging. The tension spiraled. Camille inhaled, steadying herself against the wave of accusations. "I didn't come for a scene," she said, glancing at Alexander, her tone subdued. "I came because I ran out of options. My business is in trouble. I can't give these boys the future they deserve, not by myself. And they have the right to know their father. I needed you to know." Elizabeth's face darkened with suspicion. "So it's about money?" She half laughed, though tears glistened in her eyes. "I knew it." Camille flushed with anger but maintained composure, gently stroking Mason's back as he hid his face against her. "This is about family," she corrected, voice still calm. "Alexander's children deserve the chance to know him. My finances forced my hand, yes, but that doesn't cheapen the fact that these boys have a father who's never met them, and they deserve better." Alexander's mouth twitched. He looked torn, as though thrown into a moral labyrinth. The unstoppable force of fatherly instinct clashed with the immovable object of a meticulously planned life, a life that until 30 minutes ago had not included twins. Elizabeth's shoulders slumped. The fierce bride, so used to commanding the room, seemed to waver. Perhaps a small part of her recognized the heartbreak swirling around them. Perhaps the wedding vow she was about to make suddenly seemed overshadowed by a vow Alexander might need to make to his children. There was a fleeting empathy in her gaze, followed by despair and something akin to betrayal. Tasha, still by the door, took a step forward. "Alexander, we could move the ceremony. Delay it a few hours. Let everyone breathe and talk." One of the groomsmen chimed in with a tense nod. "Or an alternate plan. We keep the wedding as scheduled, but handle this privately afterward. It's a lot to handle in one day." His eyes darted to the stunned children. "Or maybe—" Elizabeth's expression hardened again, but Alexander looked at the twins. They stared back, uncertain, vulnerable in a place that promised only confusion. Guilt carved lines across his brow. "I can't just push them aside," he said, voice thick with emotion. "They're my children." "You're about to be my husband," Elizabeth retorted, wiping an escaped tear. "We have a whole future planned. A public merger, important deals culminating in the next few weeks. There's a reason we planned this wedding so carefully." She paused, glancing down at her ring as though it weighed heavier than ever. "Are you saying you'll throw it all away for some last-minute revelation?" Camille tried to keep her face composed, though her heart twisted at Elizabeth's words. She realized in that moment the precarious line she was walking. She had always suspected Alexander's world demanded brutal choices, but seeing it so bluntly spelled out, hearing the bride speak of a life more entangled with business merges than love and family, made it all the more real. and frightening. Alexander was silent, struggling. His eyes slid from Elizabeth's tearful face back to the twins, whose identical gazes mirrored his own. For a second, Camille wondered if he might usher them out, choose his fiancée over these unexpected children. His next breath came out ragged. "I need to think," he said, voice cracking. "I can't walk into a ceremony with this heartbreak in front of me. Elizabeth—" He paused, reaching for her hand, trying to smooth over her trembling fingers. "I don't want to hurt you, but I also can't ignore that my children just arrived from God knows where." A wave of murmurs rippled through the onlookers. All were aware that the bride's father, a powerful senator, was minutes away, that the guests would start filling the rooftop soon. The unstoppable timeline was pressing in, threatening to blow up in scandal. Elizabeth took one step back, tears finally falling. "Then figure it out," she said thickly. "But if you miss the ceremony, there won't be a second chance." She straightened, trying to regain her composure. "I won't be humiliated in front of the entire city." With that, she whirled around and disappeared out the door. The hush that followed was profound. No one moved. Alexander's shoulders sagged under the weight of a choice that no one could make for him. Camille clutched the twins, feeling a surge of protectiveness flood her veins. And still, somewhere beyond the suite's closed doors, an opulent rooftop waited for a bride and groom to exchange vows. A bride who had marched off in tears, and a groom left behind with the children he never knew. At last, Tasha broke the silence. "Alex," she whispered, "the wedding starts in less than an hour." Camille looked at the father of her children, wondering how he would reconcile the man she once loved with the man the public needed him to be today. The tension in her chest ached, but the twins deserved answers, and she refused to let them see her crumble. Alexander slowly approached them, dropping to one knee again. He reached out, gently brushing Mason's hair, then lightly grasping Miles's small hand. The heartbreak in his eyes told Camille that no matter what came next, their world would never be the same. Alexander remained in a half-crouch, one hand on Miles's shoulder, the other gently brushing Mason's curls. His chest felt impossibly tight as he looked from one identical face to the other. Two children who, by all rights, should have been his pride and joy for the last 5 years but were strangers instead. His jaw clenched as a swirl of unspoken questions raged through him. How could Camille have stayed away all these years? Why didn't she come sooner? Then again, how could he judge when he knew nothing of what she had gone through? Behind him, the hush thickened. Tasha seemed ready to usher out the lingering staffers. The groomsmen remained awkwardly by the windows, clearly at a loss. A cluster of wedding assistants paused near the door, each uncertain whether to proceed with last-minute preparations or wait for instructions. Camille braced herself, meeting Alexander's gaze. Over the twins' heads, their eyes locked. It was a potent moment, one that carried all the regrets, hopes, and resentments built over half a decade. Her heart throbbed. There was a part of her that wished for a kinder setting, some small, safe corner where she could let him meet their children without a dozen onlookers and the glitz of a wedding swirling around them. But time had run out. Now, there could be no more secrets. Alexander stood slowly, still clutching Miles's small hand. His voice came out in a near whisper. "I need to talk to you," he said to Camille, privately. Camille nodded, turning to Tasha, who caught on immediately. She directed them toward a quiet sitting room off to the side of the suite, a place typically reserved for private phone calls or small bridal party gatherings. Alexander motioned to the twins. Do you mind if Tasha stays with them for just a moment? I swear it won't be long." Camille hesitated, instinctively protective, but Tasha offered a soft smile, kneeling to the boys' level. "Hey, guys," she said kindly. "How about I show you the fancy hors d'oeuvres they've got in the next room?" Miles and Mason looked up at Camille, uncertain, yet something in Tasha's gentle tone reassured them. Slowly, They nodded. Camille bent down, pressing kisses to each of their foreheads. "Just for a few minutes, okay?" she whispered. "I'll be right back." She watched Tasha lead them out, her heart clenching at the sight of them trusting a stranger in a place that felt more foreign by the second. With a resigned breath, she followed Alexander through a short hall into an even smaller, elegantly furnished den. A single lamp cast a warm glow over plush couches, while tall windows overlooked the city's skyline. The muffled echo of bustling wedding staff and classical music drifted through the walls. Alexander closed the door behind them. For several long beats, neither spoke. Camille could feel the tension rolling off him. Anger, betrayal, sorrow. She was so tightly coiled that she half expected him to start shouting, but the quiet was worse, intensifying her guilt. Finally, he ran a hand through his dark hair, messing up the careful style. "Why?" he asked, voice trembling. "Camille, why wait so long, and then show up on my wedding day with my children?" Her eyes stung. She'd rehearsed this conversation in her mind 1,000 times, but the reality was far more crushing. "I tried," she said softly, "to protect them from the corporate circus, from your mother, from the tabloids." She twisted her fingers, struggling. "You remember your mother's reaction when we first started dating? She was livid, calling me a gold digger, telling me I'd never belong. I felt like an accessory to be discarded if things got messy. And then we argued, and I left." Alexander exhaled shakily. "Yes, I remember. My mother was cruel. But you should have told me you were pregnant. You should have—" He cut himself off, his expression flickering between anger and heartbreak. "All these years I missed first steps, first words, birthdays, things I can't ever get back." Camille blinked back tears. "At first, I honestly thought I was doing you a favor. Your empire was expanding. You were in the middle of some high-stakes business deals. I convinced myself you'd only resent me for complicating your life. And then, as time passed, it got harder and harder to reach out. How do you tell someone you lied for years by omission?" She paused, shoulders heavy with regret. "I'm not saying it was right. I'm just saying it was my reality." He stared at the luxurious rug underfoot. "I might have been angry," he murmured, "but I would never have turned my back on you or our children." The sincerity in his voice made her heart twist. "Instead, I learned about them 5 years too late, in the worst possible way." "I know," she whispered, voice strangled. "I know." They fell into a tense silence, broken only by the muffled buzz of activity from the corridor. Outside, the entire city was abuzz for the Knight Grant wedding. The day was supposed to be a crowning moment, uniting two powerful families. Instead, it teetered on the edge of a scandal that could blow the wedding and possibly Alexander's future apart. After a long moment, Alexander looked up. Camille could see the storm in his gaze. "What do you want from me? To walk away from my wedding and just raise the boys with you? To throw everything away?" "I'm not asking you to do anything drastic," she said earnestly. "I only know that I can't handle them alone anymore. Miles and Mason deserve better. They have a right to a father. I came here because you can give them the life they deserve. An education, security, a chance to grow without struggle." He pressed his lips into a thin line. "Are you going to stay here in the city, or are you planning to vanish again?" Camille shook her head. "No, that's over. We came to stay. We'll find our own place, if that's what you prefer. But they need you in their lives, Alexander, even if it's only part-time." Her voice softened. "I'm not expecting you to toss your entire life in the air, but I hope you can find it in your heart to love them. They're such good kids." He closed his eyes, wrestling with a wave of emotion. When he opened them, his voice was raw. "Of course I'd love them. They're my sons. But Elizabeth and we're so close to finalizing the biggest merger Knight Innovations has seen in a decade. Everything is riding on this alliance." He gave a short, bitter laugh. and she's not exactly the forgiving type. She definitely won't accept that I have 2 children who just materialized on the day of our wedding." Camille felt a surprising stir of sympathy for him. She remembered the crushing weight of corporate demands, how every move Alexander made was scrutinized by investors, board members, the media. For him, the personal had always intermingled with the professional. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I never intended to detonate your wedding. My plan was only to tell you and then let you decide. But there wasn't time. My business tanked last month, and I can't pay the rent. The twins are old enough to ask about their father every day. I couldn't stall anymore." Alexander opened his mouth to speak, but the door flew open before he could answer. One of the groomsmen stuck his head in, looking panicked. "Alex, the senator and the bride's family are here. They're heading to the rooftop. Elizabeth is nowhere to be found. Some of the planners are in meltdown. We're supposed to start in 20 minutes, Max." Alexander's composure cracked further. 20 minutes, he echoed, almost in disbelief. He shot a haunted look at Camille, then turned to his friend. Tell them I need a little more time." The groomsman gulped. "They're not going to like that. The paparazzi are already set up outside. The ceremony's broadcast is about to go live. Media outlets are waiting for coverage. If you don't show up soon," he shook his head, "this will be a disaster for your public image." Alexander let out a shaky breath. "Understood. Just give me a few more minutes." The groomsman hesitated, glancing from Camille to Alexander with clear discomfort, then backed out, shutting the door softly behind him. Camille and Alexander exchanged a look thick with tension. "I can't think straight," he admitted. "My wedding or my kids? Or is there some middle ground? I just don't know." She stepped forward, laying a hand lightly on his arm. "They're your children, Alex, no matter what happens today. If you go through with the wedding, I won't storm the rooftop or anything like that. I'll disappear into a hotel with them for a while, give you breathing room to handle this in private." Her voice trembled despite her attempt at composure. "But you need to decide what you want, because Miles and Mason will ask for you day after day, no matter how tough this gets." He lowered his gaze. A flicker of fatherly warmth crossed his face at the mention of their names, but the fire of conflict raged on. "Elizabeth will never forgive me if I'm late or if I derail the ceremony. She's been preparing for this event for months, and so has her father. My company, all the expansions we've planned, it's all riding on this alliance. If I sabotage the wedding, it could trigger a massive breakdown of trust. Stocks would crash, staff might lose their jobs." He stopped, looking worn and torn apart. Camille couldn't help but wonder. Could he really marry someone who would not accept the existence of his children? But it wasn't her place to say. Yes, it hurt, deeply. But she had chosen her path long ago, and now the consequences were unfolding. Perhaps she too had to accept that father and sons might have a precarious relationship overshadowed by corporate demands and a new wife's resentment. A soft knock came at the door. Tasha, her face lined with concern. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "but the boys are starting to ask for you." She glanced apologetically at Alexander. "And Elizabeth. She told the bridesmaids she wants to see you the moment you're free." Alexander's throat bobbed as he swallowed. He looked at Camille one last time, heartbreak swirling in his eyes. "I need to see the kids," he managed, before I decide what to do." Camille nodded, forcing a small, trembling smile. They emerged from the den to find Miles and Mason peeking around Tasha's legs. Their eyes lit up upon seeing both parents, but there was a question in their faces. Camille guided them into Alexander's arms, and he hugged them, closing his eyes as though memorizing their scent and warmth. Just then, a flurry of footsteps sounded in the corridor. Several elegantly dressed individuals, Elizabeth's bridesmaids and some of Alexander's close staff, hurried by, whispering about the bride's disappearance. A tension-laden hush spread throughout the suite, a sure sign that time had nearly run out. Alexander pulled away from the children gently. "I have to go," he told them, his voice pained but gentle. "But I'll be back soon." "How soon?" Mason asked, blinking. Alexander's throat worked soundlessly before he managed an answer. I'm not sure, but no matter what, I'll find you." Camille's eyes burned as she absorbed the weight of that statement. She gathered the twins, feeling Alexander's gaze linger on them for a heartbeat longer. Then he pivoted on his polished shoes and hurried down the hall, headed toward a bride who might no longer be willing to say yes. Outside the suite's doors, the corridors of the Grand Astoria bustled with a subdued panic. From somewhere down the hallway, Camille heard the clatter of hurried footsteps and the discreet flutter of dresses. A wave of hushed voices, some from wedding organizers, some from anxious guests, mixed with the distant strains of classical music. The ceremony start time was minutes away. Camille stayed back with the twins, Tasha still at her side, as Alexander rushed off in the direction of the bridal suite. She didn't need to follow to know the confrontation he was about to face. Just imagining the look on Elizabeth's face made her chest tighten. This was never the way she wanted him to discover he was a father. Not on his wedding day, not with the press gathered outside, not with a high-stakes corporate deal hanging over his head. Yet there they all were, snagged in a net of unstoppable reality. She turned her attention to Miles and Mason, who were standing close, clutching each other's hands. Neither boy spoke, but their eyes carried the same question. Would their father come back? Tasha, sensing the tension, cleared her throat. "Hey, maybe we can get you all out of the thick of this." She cast a sympathetic glance at Camille. "I know a side hallway where you can wait, away from all these people rushing around. In case it turns chaotic." Camille nodded, feeling numb. She and Tasha guided the boys down a quieter passage, weaving around staff and floral displays. Along the way, Camille heard snippets of frantic conversations, someone noting the bride's anger, someone else mentioning the groom seemed distracted, the father of the bride pacing in the hall. At last, Tasha pushed open a discreet door that led into a small lounge used for staff breaks. It was clean, simple, and, most importantly, unoccupied. "Wait here," Tasha suggested gently. "I'll keep an ear out for what's happening. If Alex comes looking, I'll direct him here." Camille dropped onto a vinyl sofa, drawing the children close to her sides. She could feel Mason trembling slightly, though he tried to hide it behind a brave little face. Miles's eyes were glassy and full of uncertainty. "Mommy," Mason said quietly, "did we do something wrong?" Camille's heart cracked. She kissed the top of his head. "No, sweetheart. You haven't done anything wrong. Grown-ups just, sometimes, don't do things the right way." Miles pressed his face into her arm. "Daddy's not mad at us?" Camille's voice quavered. "He's not mad at you. He's confused. Everything happened so fast." Her arms wound tighter around them both. No matter how harsh the world outside, these boys needed to know they were loved. She was about to add more reassurance when Tasha leaned back in, face grim. "They found Elizabeth," she whispered. "She locked herself in one of the bridal rooms, doesn't want to speak to Alex." Tasha sighed, tension evident. Her parents are here, furious. The senator's aides are scrambling, and the groom's side is stuck in the middle. Camille closed her eyes. A swirl of guilt and sympathy coursed through her. She couldn't help remembering the early days of her romance with Alexander, his plans to expand Night Innovations, the corporate alliances he talked about that required marrying into certain circles. She'd known even then that Alex was under immense pressure to prove himself beyond his family's legacy, and now, with Elizabeth's family holding the key to a big merger, all of it was precariously at stake. Tasha hesitated, then stepped closer. "Camille, I overheard some stuff. Elizabeth's father is basically threatening to pull out of the deal if Alex humiliates his daughter publicly by delaying or canceling. He's talking about legal complications even. It's..." It's messy. Camille forced herself to breathe calmly. I see, she managed. What else was there to say? The children exchanged worried glances, sensing the seriousness of the conversation. Camille offered a comforting smile, though inside, her chest constricted. She wanted to whisk them away to some peaceful corner of the city, away from the swirl of paparazzi, gossip, and heartbreak. But she had come here for a reason, to let Alexander decide if he wanted to be their father openly or maintain a distance. And the question still hung. Another few minutes ticked by in tense silence. Then Tasha's phone buzzed. She lifted it, reading a text, and sighed heavily. Alex wants you to join him, she told Camille quietly. He's asking for you and the kids to come to the rooftop, right away. Camille's stomach lurched. She couldn't imagine a worse place to bring the twins than at the very sight of an impending or imploding wedding, with guests looking on. Why? She asked, her voice unsteady. Does he want them to see him get married? Tasha looked torn. He said he needs to talk to Elizabeth with you and the twins present. Probably to... She sighed. I don't know, Camille. Maybe he's trying to come clean in front of her family? Maybe he thinks it'll be easier if everyone sees? Or maybe he's grasping at a last-ditch solution? The notion chilled Camille, but despite her own fear, she nodded. The twins deserved to see that their father acknowledged them, no matter how painful it might be for all involved. All right, she said. Take us there. She rose, guiding Miles and Mason to their feet. Her nerves felt frazzled as they trooped through the corridor, Tasha leading the way. With each step, the classical music grew louder, the crowd's chatter more discernible. They passed clusters of people in formal attire, some openly staring at the two curly-haired boys clinging to Camille's hands. Whispers trailed them, speculations about who they were, how this mother and children fit into the day's unfolding drama. Finally, they emerged onto the rooftop, which had been transformed into a dreamy wedding scene. Rows of white chairs facing a lavish floral arch, ribbons fluttering in the breeze, and crystal chandeliers suspended under a transparent canopy that framed the sky. The morning sun cast a golden glow. Rows of impeccably dressed guests milled around, many of them looking restless or confused. Waitstaff in crisp uniforms circulated with drinks, though the celebratory mood was clearly overshadowed by tension. Near the arch stood a group of prominent-looking individuals, Elizabeth's parents, some high-profile guests, and several of Alexander's own executives. At the center of it all, Alexander stood with Elizabeth. Even from a distance, Camille could sense the hostility in Elizabeth's posture. She wore an ornate wedding gown, half-laced, veil pinned crookedly. A bridesmaid hovered nearby, uncertain whether to fix it or stay back. As Camille and the children approached, conversation in the crowd dipped into hushed murmurs. People leaned in, craning to see. Cameramen, presumably from media outlets covering the event, began shifting their lenses in this direction. Tasha murmured, "The coverage is supposed to start. They're probably filming already." Camille's heart thundered. She wanted to shield Miles and Mason's eyes, to push the cameras away, but she had no choice except to follow Alexander's beckoning gesture. Elizabeth's eyes locked onto them. She looked every inch the furious bride, tears staining her makeup, a forced composure hugging her posture. Next to her, Alexander glanced back and forth between Elizabeth and his children, sweat beading on his brow. He stepped forward, carefully drawing Elizabeth with him. "Everyone," he began, voice quavering. There's been a development. Before we proceed, I need you to meet..." He paused, searching for words. "These are my sons, Miles and Mason, and this is their mother, Camille." A ripple of gasps darted through the guests. Flashes from cameras sparked. In the front row, Elizabeth's father stiffened, fury radiating from him. Her mother's eyes narrowed. Alexander's colleagues exchanged alarmed looks. The bride herself swallowed, her face pale. Camille stood tall, silently offering a reassuring squeeze to each twin's hand. The children tried to hide behind her skirt, overwhelmed by so many eyes. Elizabeth forced a strained, icy smile. "Alexander," she hissed through clenched teeth, "do you seriously intend to do this here, now?" She gestured at the crowd, the cameras, the entire wedding spectacle. He cleared his throat. "I can't walk down that aisle with this secret. It's not right. We have to address it." Despite the trembling in his voice, he turned to Elizabeth's parents. "Senator Grant, Mrs. Grant, I'm sorry to drop this on you, but these are my children. I found out only this morning. I want to do right by them." Camille could practically feel the tension snap in the air. The senator's expression turned thunderous. "Children? Your children? Good God, Alexander, how long have you known about this? Were you planning to keep it hidden after marrying my daughter?" His voice rose, attracting even more stares. "I only knew today," Alexander repeated, glancing at Camille for a fraction of a second. Elizabeth's mother clutched the senator's arm. "I can't believe this. After everything, the wedding, the merger, have you lost your mind? The press is going to eat this up." Her voice trembled with equal parts anger and panic. Elizabeth forced out a bitter laugh, tears glittering. "So what? You're going to stand here and make a show of fatherhood? You think that solves anything? We're about to be wed before hundreds of guests." She turned a searing glare toward Camille. "And you waltz in like some soap opera plot twist?" Camille swallowed, meeting Elizabeth's stare. She refused to shrink away, though her insides trembled. "I didn't plan to crash your wedding," she said quietly. "I only wanted Alexander to know the truth. I didn't expect—" She waved a shaky hand at the lavish scene. "All this." The crowd hung on her every word. Miles and Mason huddled closer, eyes darting nervously among the sea of disapproving stares and swirling cameras. The bride's father shook his head, exasperation filling the silence. "Alexander, I warned you against your personal entanglements. This is exactly the sort of scandal that can sink your credibility. Think about our joint venture. If you disgrace my daughter, you disgrace the entire Grant family." Alexander squared his shoulders, trying to muster the composure that had served him well in many tense corporate negotiations. His voice, though soft, carried determination. "I realize this is a shock, but Miles and Mason deserve more than silence. I won't pretend they don't exist just to keep up appearances." He swallowed, then looked at Elizabeth. "I'm sorry. I know this isn't fair to you." Elizabeth's tear-filled gaze flickered to the twins, then back to him. "You promised me stability," she whispered. "A life where everything was perfectly orchestrated. And now, your secrets are unraveling in front of everyone. How can we salvage this?" "Maybe we can't," Alexander confessed, voice trembling. "I need to take responsibility for my children. I won't hide them. If that costs me the merger, costs me our wedding, then that's a price I might have to pay." The crowd bristled with shock. The senator sucked in a sharp breath, looking ready to erupt, but Elizabeth seemed too stunned to lash out further. She brushed her fingertips over her wedding gown as if trying to remind herself of the day that was supposed to be hers to command. Silence stretched, every eye on them. Finally, Camille found the courage to speak. "If marrying Elizabeth is what you truly want, we'll stay out of your way. But the children—" She hesitated, aware of the cameras capturing every word. "The children deserve your presence, at least in some form." Alexander's face twisted with heartbreak. He stared at his bride, then at the twins, then at his furious would-be in-laws. For an agonizing second, it seemed he might capitulate to the pressure, push Camille and the boys aside and say, "I do," for the sake of business and public image. Then, with a shaky breath, he knelt by Miles and Mason in front of the entire gathering. "I'm sorry you had to see all this," he said, voice husky. You deserve better than to be paraded around like a scandal. But I want you in my life. I need to be your dad." He swallowed thickly, ignoring the gasps around him. "I won't lose you a second time." Tears blurred Camille's vision. As the paparazzi captured every angle, Alexander slowly stood, pivoting toward Elizabeth, whose eyes shone with shock and pain. "Elizabeth," he said softly, "I care about you. But I have to be honest, I can't enter our marriage while hiding this. If you can accept my children as part of our life, I'll stand with you at that altar and continue the merger, the business, everything. But if you can't, then I understand." A collective hush blanketed the rooftop, the city's skyline behind them glowing in the late morning sun. It was a moment of raw truth in a world of carefully guarded secrets. Everyone awaited Elizabeth's response. She stood motionless, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Accept them?" she repeated softly. She gazed at the wide-eyed twins, then at her own parents, who glared disapprovingly. She knew exactly what was at stake: her family's reputation, the merger they had painstakingly orchestrated, and her pride. After a breathless pause, she lifted her chin. "I can't," she declared, voice cracking. "I can't accept that you fathered children with another woman, one who barges in on our wedding day. Do you have any idea what that does to our life plan? You promised me perfection." Anger flared again, overshadowing her tears. "You expect me to smile and welcome them as if they didn't just destroy everything? No." She turned away, shaking her head in despair. "I won't do it." The senator gave a firm nod of approval at her refusal, looking visibly relieved. He glowered at Alexander. "You'd be wise to rethink. Don't throw your future away over an emotional outburst." But Alexander's shoulders sank, a heavy sadness overtaking him as he realized the finality in Elizabeth's words. "Then, I guess we're done," he murmured, each syllable weighted with regret. A flicker of heartbreak crossed his features. This was a woman he had known and planned a future with after all. Yet there was no moving past her ultimatum. Elizabeth's father visibly bristled, about to speak, but she waved him off. With her gown rustling, she stormed down the aisle, tears streaming, friends and family rushing after her. The senator glared at Alexander one last time before following his daughter, shaking his head in disgust. In their wake, the wedding guests stirred in astonishment, paparazzi cameras popping. The once poised ceremony lay in shambles, overshadowed by broken vows that had never been spoken. Alexander ran a trembling hand over his face, exhaling sharply. The swirl of watchers, cameras, and outraged chatter swam around him. He stepped toward Camille and the twins, who huddled by the arch's floral arrangement, an unlikely nucleus in the storm's eye. Camille's heart pounded as he neared. Her mouth opened, but no words came. Miles and Mason looked up at their father, bewildered but relieved that he hadn't deserted them. Slowly, Alexander placed a hand on each boy's head, drawing them closer. "I'm sorry," he choked out, gazing at Camille. "I didn't mean for you to be thrown into the spotlight like that, or for the kids to be paraded around in front of everyone. I couldn't lie anymore." She swallowed back her own tears, ignoring the guests who still milled, staring in shock. "It's not your fault," she whispered. "I brought them here. I knew there might be consequences." A loud voice from the crowd called something about shameful betrayal and night fiasco. The paparazzi pressed in to shout questions. Flashes of cameras soared. Tasha appeared out of nowhere, urging them to retreat, a protective hand on Camille's back. "We need to get you inside now," she insisted, glaring at the swarm of onlookers. Without another word, Alexander took one child in each arm, refusing to let any more pictures be snapped of their frightened faces. Camille followed close behind, shielding them from the intense glare of a dozen cameras as Tasha expertly guided them back into the hotel. As they fled the fiasco on the rooftop, something inside Camille uncoiled, an odd mixture of relief, sadness, and flickering hope. The wedding was over. The business alliance was surely doomed, And yet, for the first time, Alexander had unequivocally chosen his children. That, if nothing else, felt like a victory. A hush fell over the mezzanine corridor as the heavy doors closed behind them. The world outside, the paparazzi, the fractured wedding, and the outraged guests faded to a muffled roar. Inside it was just Alexander, Camille, the twins, and Tasha. Each of them looked shaken, as though they'd run a gauntlet of flashing cameras and angry voices. Alexander set Miles and Mason gently on the floor. The children immediately clung to Camille, their small faces etched with alarm. The tension in the hall was palpable. Even Tasha had tears in her eyes as she realized the storm that had just erupted on the rooftop. Everything that had been planned so meticulously for months, perhaps years, had unraveled in minutes. "They're still trying to corner Elizabeth," Tasha managed, wiping at her cheeks. "Her parents are furious, Alex. They're threatening legal action or who knows what. The press is all over the place." She gave him a wavering look. "We need to get you out of here without causing more chaos." Alexander's face was pale with shock. He ran a trembling hand over his hair, which was now disheveled and damp from sweat. "I know," he said hoarsely. I didn't plan on humiliating them in front of everyone, but I couldn't go through with it. I couldn't stand there and pretend my sons didn't exist." Camille gently stroked Mason's curls, feeling her heart break for Alexander, for the children, for the bride who had expected a flawless day. "We can slip out," she offered softly. "Tasha can help with security. We'll find a safe place away from the cameras." Alexander nodded, swallowing hard. "Yes, let's go." Tasha led them down a back hallway that staff used for deliveries. A small elevator opened into a service corridor on the lower level, removed from the press and the furious wedding guests. The corridors smelled faintly of cleaning supplies and leftover catering. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mercifully quiet. Alexander insisted on carrying the twins again, wanting to shield them from any more prying eyes. At last, they reached a concrete staircase leading to a side exit. One lone security guard manned the door, looking unsure what to do, but Tasha flashed her badge and explained they needed to leave without fanfare. The guard, recognizing Alexander Knight, stepped aside quickly. Stepping out into the sunlight, Camille inhaled the crisp air that hovered between early afternoon warmth and a slight breeze. They were at the far edge of the hotel premises, behind tall hedges where no cameras were stationed. The city's skyline loomed overhead. A swirl of conflicting emotions took hold of her, relief at escaping the spectacle, guilt for the damage done, and a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, this marked the start of something honest between Alexander and his children. A sleek black car with tinted windows waited at the curb, no driver in sight. Tasha tapped her phone with quick, precise motions. "Give me 2 minutes," she said. "I'll have a driver here." She turned to Camille, pressing a slip of paper into her hand. "This is my private number. If we get separated, call me immediately. I'll do everything I can to help." Camille nodded gratefully, tucking the paper into her pocket. The twins peered around, still wide-eyed from the ordeal. They said nothing, but their hold on Alexander's jacket remained tight. He tried to offer them a reassuring smile, but it came out as a shaky attempt. His mind was clearly whirling with the gravity of what he'd just done. "Thank you, Tasha," Alexander said, drawing her into a quick hug. She clung to him for a moment, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "You've been the only real friend I could trust in this madness." She exhaled. "Don't mention it. Now just get somewhere safe before the media realizes you're gone." She stepped aside, furiously typing notes on her phone, presumably to coordinate with hotel security. Alexander guided Camille and the children into the black car that, as promised, had an open door waiting. Within seconds they sank into smooth leather seats, the tinted windows offering them a cocoon from the outside chaos. A driver appeared at Tasha's beckon, took the wheel, and nodded at Alexander for instructions. Alexander exhaled sharply. "Take us to my apartment," he said at length, voice still trembling. "The penthouse in Midtown. Use a route away from the main roads. I don't want any photographers following us." The driver nodded, pulling away from the curb. Tasha gave them a final wave through the open passenger window, a worried line etched on her brow. Then they were gone. Car merging onto a side street, navigating away from the grandeur of the Grand Astoria. The wedding that wasn't would remain behind them, left for the tabloids and rumor mills to dissect. Inside the car, tension pressed in on all sides. Camille lifted a hand to stroke Mason's hair. Miles leaned tiredly against Alexander's shoulder. The boy's small palm rested tentatively on Alexander's chest, as if absorbing the reality that this man was truly his father. Camille noticed how Alexander's eyes shimmered with emotion whenever he looked down at them, though he stayed silent for most of the ride. Perhaps words failed him, or he was bracing for whatever next steps had to come. The city blurred past the windows, towering skyscrapers and bustling sidewalks, a stark contrast to the quiet bubble of the car. Camille's heart pounded steadily, each beat echoing with the enormity of what had just happened. She had arrived planning to quietly inform him of the children's existence, expecting him to either reject or support them behind closed doors. Now, the entire city, indeed, the entire country, might soon know that Alexander Knight had children born in secrecy. The magnitude of that public reveal dazed her. Eventually, the car pulled into a private underground garage beneath an upscale high-rise. The driver parked near a discreet elevator lobby, letting them out. Alexander stayed vigilant, scanning for any paparazzi or watchers. Satisfied that the coast was clear, he beckoned for them to follow into the elevator. His penthouse was accessible only by a special keycard he carried, ensuring privacy. The elevator ride was silent, tension coiling tighter with each floor they ascended. When the doors slid open, they found themselves in an expansive foyer of polished marble floors and modern art. A floor-to-ceiling window spilled daylight across a spacious living room, all sleek lines and understated luxury. Everything exuded the hallmark of someone who lived with meticulous order, nothing out of place, not a speck of dust. Camille, still holding Mason's hand, stepped out slowly, feeling an odd sense of déjà vu. She remembered Alexander's old apartment from 5 years ago. Modern minimalism, carefully curated. This was a new place, bigger, more refined, but it held the same essence of pristine sophistication. It felt sterile, lacking the warmth that children's laughter or personal touches might bring. Alexander set Miles down gently and turned toward Camille, raking a hand through his still mussed hair. I'm sorry," he murmured for what felt like the 100th time, voice shaking with exhaustion. "This is so far from what I wanted. I know the kids didn't deserve any of that spectacle." Camille's eyes glistened. She reached out, resting a light hand on his arm. "None of us wanted that," she whispered. "But it's over now. You made the choice to acknowledge them, and I—" She swallowed, emotion constricting her throat. "I can't tell you how much that means, no matter the fallout." He offered her a fragile smile. Then he gently knelt, beckoning Miles and Mason closer. The boys approached hesitantly, scanning the vast living space. They'd never been in a home so sleek and quiet. Alexander exhaled. I guess I should show you around. This is your home too, if you want it to be." Camille froze, her breath catching. Her plan had been to find a small apartment on her own, someplace the boys could call home while hopefully forging a relationship with their father. But Alexander's words hinted at something else. An open door to live here, under his roof. Was he serious, or just stunned from the day's events? She met his gaze. "You're sure? That's a big step." His lips pressed together. "I don't know if it's right or wrong," he admitted. "But I do know I want to be with my sons. And if you're comfortable, temporarily at least, it might help us figure out what the future looks like." A wry laugh escaped him. I've lost my fiancé, probably lost the biggest merger in night innovations history, and I'm about to face a media firestorm. But the one thing that feels certain is that I won't let these boys out of my life again." A warmth spread through Camille's chest. She glanced at Miles and Mason, seeing curiosity spark in their eyes. They'd begun to roam the living room, timidly poking at a leather sofa, gazing up at the panoramic city view. It was a far cry from the cramped space they'd shared overseas. "Let's talk about it," she said at length. "We can see how the boys settle in. We need time." Alexander nodded gratefully, rising to his feet. He led them through the penthouse, giving a brief tour. A sleek kitchen outfitted with stainless steel everything, a vast dining area, a private office behind glass doors. Each space whispered wealth and efficiency. Finally, they came to a hallway that ended in 2 doors. "My room," he pointed, "and a spare, well, a guest suite." He looked at the twins with a soft smile. "We can set it up for you two if you'd like. Bunk beds or whatever you want." A shy spark lit up Miles's face. "Bunk beds?" he murmured, as though the idea were dazzling. Mason, always more cautious, stayed near Camille's side but smiled faintly as well. Camille felt tears threaten again. She couldn't recall a time she'd seen the twins so enthralled by something as simple as the possibility of a fancy new bedroom. The life she'd built them overseas had been modest. Cozy but modest. Here, everything reeked of possibility. Exhaustion overcame them all. After the day's tumult, hunger gnawed in each belly, yet no one had the energy for a grand meal. Alexander rummaged in the kitchen, producing some fresh fruit, crackers, and bottled water. The 4 of them settled around the living room's glass coffee table. Miles and Mason devoured the fruit in silence, occasionally shooting wide-eyed glances around the penthouse. Camille noticed Alexander's phone buzzing relentlessly on the marble countertop. He ignored it at first, wincing at the reminders of the outside world. Then, perhaps out of necessity, he rose to check. She watched as tension etched itself deeper across his brow. "Tasha says the media's gone wild," he reported grimly. "Everyone's calling. My mother left a dozen messages." A haunted look flitted across his face. "I'm sure she's livid." Camille frowned, recalling the cold disapproval of Alexander's mother from years ago. That woman had already hated her. How much sharper would her wrath be now? She decided not to ask. Just then, Mason tugged on Camille's sleeve. "Mama," he said quietly, "where are we going to sleep tonight?" His innocent question cut through the tension like a blade. Alexander stepped forward, voice tender. "If it's all right with your mom, you can stay here. Sleep in the guest suite. I'll find some pajamas and get you two settled. Tomorrow, we'll figure out everything else. School, your routine, everything." Miles glanced between his mother and father. "You have pajamas that fit us?" he asked, brow furrowed. Alexander paused, then laughed ruefully. "Not yet," he admitted, "but we'll make do for tonight. I'll order new things for you first thing in the morning. You can even help pick them out." The twins looked at each other, the corners of their mouths lifting in a shy sort of excitement. Camille, moved by Alexander's earnestness, nodded her approval. "All right," she said, voice thick. "We'll stay." Relief flickered across Alexander's face. It was a fragile happiness, tempered by the knowledge that tomorrow would bring a hailstorm of scandal and tough decisions. But for now, at least, they had a temporary refuge, a chance to breathe, to let the twins feel the warmth of their father's presence and to see if, despite everything, they could form a real bond. Later, once the boys were settled in the spare bedroom, wearing T-shirts that dwarfed them as makeshift pajamas, Camille found Alexander leaning against the hallway wall, head bowed. In the soft light of the corridor, he looked drained beyond measure. She approached quietly. He spoke without looking up. "I ruined her wedding, Camille. Elizabeth might never forgive me. Her father will bury me if he can? And my own mother? Well, let's just say she'll have a field day scolding me about how I've destroyed years of planning." A humorless chuckle slipped out. "And yet, if I had to choose again, I'd still pick my kids." It's the only thing that felt right in that moment. Camille's hand found his, her voice a gentle hush. "I'm sorry for what you've lost, but I'm so grateful for what you've chosen." He lifted his gaze, meeting her eyes with a haunted vulnerability. "I won't lose them," he repeated. "I can't." His voice trembled. "But I'm terrified about tomorrow." She squeezed his hand. "We'll face it together," she said quietly, hoping it was true. In that moment they stood side by side, battered by the day's chaos, bracing for whatever storms lay ahead. A single flicker of hope lingered, that amidst the rubble of a broken wedding, a new family might just emerge. Dawn broke over the city like a hesitant apology, thin beams of light creeping through the glass walls of Alexander's penthouse. Camille blinked awake on a plush armchair, her neck stiff from having dozed off halfway through the night. She rubbed her eyes and surveyed the silent living room. It still felt surreal. Yesterday's chaos replayed in fractured memories. The wedding that never happened, the twins introduced before a sea of stunned onlookers, the cameras popping like gunfire. She found herself almost surprised by the morning calm. No paparazzi bursts, no outraged father of the bride, no glitzy decor. Instead, there was an unassuming quiet, broken only by the hum of the climate control and the rustle of someone stirring down the hall. Camille drew in a slow breath, exhaling some of the tension that had tightened her chest overnight. She rose, wandering to the kitchen. As she passed a mirror on the wall, she caught her reflection, smudged mascara, hair messy from stress and sleep. The woman she saw felt like a stranger, one who had returned out of desperation, only to tumble headlong into a storm. But there was no going back. Whatever her regrets, the twins had Alexander in their lives now. That knowledge steadied her, even as she worried about the repercussions. In the kitchen, she flipped on a light and started opening cupboards in search of something to feed the children. Minimalistic shelves and an expensive fridge greeted her. She discovered fresh fruit, some eggs, and fancy juices, but not much else. It seemed that Alexander, perpetually busy, rarely cooked his own meals. Or he'd had staff handle it. Regardless, this morning it was up to her. She selected eggs and a bowl of strawberries, fumbling quietly to avoid waking the boys. As she rinsed the fruit, memories from the previous night rushed back. Alexander's ragged voice, the twins curled in oversized shirts, the swirl of heartbreak in those last moments on the hotel rooftop. Her stomach knotted at the thought of the media frenzy likely unfolding beyond these walls. She had just started slicing berries when she heard a soft footstep behind her. Turning, she found Mason in the doorway, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Despite the tension of the prior day, a shy smile formed on his face as he took in the bright, modern kitchen. "Good morning, sweetie," Camille whispered, setting down the knife. "You slept okay?" Mason nodded, his curls a disheveled halo. "Where's Miles?" he asked, voice still husky from sleep. Camille rinsed her hands. "Probably still asleep in that big bed," she teased gently. "Do you want to help me make breakfast for you two?" Mason's eyes lit up as he patted over. She gave him a clean dish towel and some strawberries to pat dry. He concentrated, small tongue poking out in focus. For a moment it felt remarkably normal, a mother and her child in a kitchen, preparing for a day that might hold promise. Footsteps again in the hall. This time Alexander appeared, hair tousled and face drawn with fatigue. He wore a plain t-shirt and casual pants, a departure from his usual impeccable suits. Upon seeing Mason and Camille at the counter, he hesitated, as if uncertain he'd be welcome. Then Mason spotted him and broke into a hesitant grin. "Daddy," he said, still testing the word. Alexander's eyes softened, a complicated tangle of relief and sadness weaving across his features. "Morning, buddy." He stepped closer, ruffling Mason's hair gently. "You guys are up early." "I wanted to make breakfast," Camille offered. "Just something simple for the boys." A flicker of gratitude crossed Alexander's face. "Thanks. That's kind of you." Silence followed, filled by the quiet sounds of morning routine, Camille beating eggs, Mason carefully placing clean strawberries in a bowl, Alexander lingering near the coffee maker. Yet tension undercut it all. They both knew that out there, beyond these safe penthouse windows, a furious business empire, a scorned bride, and a rabid media machine awaited. Soon enough, Miles shuffled in, eyes blinking against the light. Spotting Alexander, he instinctively approached, as if verifying that yes, his father was still there. Alexander smiled and hoisted him onto a bar stool. "Did you sleep okay?" Alexander asked softly. Miles nodded, though he seemed more than a little overwhelmed by the penthouse's grandeur and by everything that had happened. He fiddled with the edge of the marble countertop, occasionally glancing out the tall windows at the cityscape. Camille cracked a few more eggs, aware of the small but meaningful progress in this new father-child dynamic. Eventually, they all sat down around the kitchen island. Camille served simple scrambled eggs with fresh strawberries. The boys ate eagerly. Alexander mostly sipped his coffee, eyes flicking to his phone, which lit up with incoming texts that he still ignored. "After we eat," Camille ventured, "maybe we can see about getting some clothes that fit the twins. They can't live in t-shirts forever." Alexander nodded, looking grateful for the practical distraction. "Yes, absolutely. We'll take them shopping, or we can have things delivered, whatever's easiest." At that, a pang of worry pricked Camille. "Will we even be able to go out without being swarmed by photographers?" she asked quietly. "Yesterday was so public." A shadow crossed Alexander's expression. He checked his phone with a resigned sigh. "Tasha's been texting updates," he said. "The story is everywhere. Major news outlets, gossip columns, even business journals. Some are spinning it as Knight's secret children derail wedding merger. Others are speculating about who you are, where you've been, whether you're, well, you know, a gold digger or something." His voice tightened. "I'm sorry." Camille's stomach clenched. She remembered all too well the disapproving whispers from years ago when she and Alexander first began dating. She swallowed a rush of anger. "I shouldn't be surprised," she managed. "People always want scandal. But the twins don't deserve to be the center of it." Alexander nodded grimly. "We'll protect them." He raked a hand through his hair. "I can call in some favors, arrange a security detail if we need to step outside. Or we can lie low until the media circus calms down." She recognized the weight of his words. This was a new reality for all of them. No quiet assimilation of father and sons. Their introduction to the world had happened in the brightest, most painful spotlight. Miles piped up between bites of strawberries, voice muffled. "Mommy, can we still go to a playground? You promised we'd find one in the city." Camille's heart twinged. She had indeed promised her sons that big cities had big playgrounds, hoping to ease their fears about moving. Now, with a swirl of paparazzi on the prowl, that might not be so easy. "We will," she promised gently. "But maybe a quieter one, where it won't be too crowded." Alexander's expression softened. "I'll figure something out," he told Miles. "We'll get you both to a playground soon. Maybe we can talk to the doorman about a private little park." The boys smiled in unison, small faces brightening at the mention of an outing that felt normal. Camille gazed at Alexander, her chest swelling with gratitude. He was trying, despite the chaos and the heartbreak he carried. They were interrupted by the chiming ring of Alexander's phone. He grimaced at the screen, ignoring it again. Then it pinged with an urgent text tone. Sighing, he set down his coffee. "It's my mother," he said, voice flat. She's downstairs in the lobby, demanding to come up. Camille felt a chill. She had never officially met his mother in a friendly capacity. The woman's shadow had hovered over their relationship in the past. Wealthy, controlling, convinced Camille wasn't good enough. Now, after the fiasco, it was certain that she would be livid. Alexander looked at Camille apologetically. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "I can turn her away if you prefer." But Camille knew that wouldn't solve anything. Eventually, the twins would meet their grandmother, and the tension might as well be faced sooner than later. Better to handle it now, she decided, steeling herself. "Let her up." Alexander nodded and tapped a response on his phone. Moments later, a beep at the private elevator signaled his mother's arrival. Camille told the children to wait in the living room, turning on a gentle kids' show to occupy them. She didn't want them to see a confrontation that might get heated. Alexander led Camille to the foyer just as the elevator doors slid open. Out stepped Eleanor Knight, a tall, impeccably styled woman in her late 50s. She was dressed in a designer pantsuit, every strand of her silver-streaked hair perfectly in place. Behind her was an equally polished man, a family lawyer or advisor, perhaps. Eleanor's gaze swept the penthouse, then locked on Alexander with a kind of icy fury. "Alexander," she said crisply, her voice echoing. "I've been trying to reach you. You turned your phone off?" He straightened his shoulders. "I needed space, Mother." She snapped the handle of her leather purse. "Space? While you publicly humiliated the Grant family and cost your company the biggest merger in its history, while half the world is gossiping about your secret children?" Her tone dripped with outrage, though she kept it measured. "I raised you better than this." Alexander's jaw clenched. Before he could respond, Eleanor's eyes flicked to Camille. A flash of recognition, followed by a sneer of disdain, crossed her face. "You," she said, "the woman who vanished years ago. So you've re-emerged, bringing all this scandal with you?" Camille's stomach dropped. She refused to cower, though. "I didn't ask for a scandal," she answered steadily. "I only wanted Alexander to know his sons." Eleanor cast a look toward the living room, where the muffled sounds of cartoon voices played. "Children," she said, voice tight. "So you claim, and you chose his wedding day to reveal them? Convenient." Her tone made it clear what she thought of Camille's motives. Alexander spoke up, stepping protectively closer to Camille. "They are my sons, Mother. I had no idea until yesterday, but it's true. I won't deny them." Eleanor's lips thinned. She clasped her hands, though anger simmered in her eyes. "Let's say for argument's sake that they are. What do you think you've done? Elizabeth's father is fuming. The Grants are already moving to smear your name and sabotage any future partnerships. Investors are panicking." She exhaled sharply. "Your father built Knight Innovations from the ground up. Are you so careless that you'll let one moment of madness destroy it all?" Alexander's voice shook with quiet intensity. "It was never just about the business, Mother. I have children. I won't treat them like a shameful secret." Her eyes narrowed. "You had a responsibility to this family, and to your fiancé. Now you've wasted everyone's time and resources. And for what? This scandalous fiasco?" She pointed a manicured finger at Camille. Camille set her jaw, refusing to be cowed. "I understand you're upset, but if you blame me for everything, you're ignoring the truth. Alexander deserves to be a father to his kids." Eleanor studied Camille with frosty disapproval. "Alexander, can we speak alone?" she demanded, ignoring Camille's statement. "There must be a way to salvage the company's reputation. We can negotiate with the Grants. Damage control, but not if you're entangled with this woman." Alexander inhaled a shaky breath. "I'm not tossing Camille aside, nor will I hide our children." Her lips tightened. "Alexander, be logical. If you want to keep your seat as CEO, you can't waltz around coddling some ex-lover who reappears out of nowhere. The board is going to hold you accountable. They might even stage a takeover if you let business alliances crumble." She turned a steely gaze on Camille. If you cared about him, you'd step away quietly. Let him rebuild the damage you caused. Camille's fists clenched, but she forced herself to remain calm. She'd expected this level of venom. He's a grown man, Mrs. Knight. The decision is his. Eleanor's expression promised more battles ahead. Still, she pivoted back to her son, controlling her anger. You have a shareholders' meeting in 2 days. I strongly advise you to handle this situation before then. Her eyes flickered again, scanning the penthouse, the distant sight of children in the living room. Because if you don't, you'll lose everything your father built, and you will not drag the Knight name through the mud. With that, she turned on her heel, her advisor trailing, and disappeared into the elevator. The hush she left in her wake was almost suffocating. Camille touched Alexander's arm gently. Are you okay? He shook his head, raw pain in his eyes. No, he murmured, voice cracked. But I will be. He lifted his gaze to hers. We'll figure this out. I'm not giving up on my children. I just need to find a way to keep Knight Innovations from collapsing under the scandal. Camille stepped in closer, resting her hand on his shoulder. You're not alone, she whispered. I know this is my mess too. I'll do whatever it takes to help. He offered a wan smile before heading to the living room. Let's check on the boys, he said. Then we'll decide what comes next. They walked side by side, hearts pounding with the weight of an uncertain future. Outside, the sun rose higher, shining on a city that pored over gossip columns and business headlines alike. Inside, a new family, bound by secrets finally exposed, clung to the hope that love and resolve could outlast the storm. Camille caught a glimpse of the twins sprawled across Alexander's plush white sofa, fascinated by an animated show playing on the giant TV screen. Something whimsical with bright colors and silly voices. Their little forms looked so small against the expansive luxury of the penthouse. It struck her again just how drastically their lives had changed in less than 24 hours. Alexander stood by the window, arms crossed over his chest. He stared at the skyline, but she suspected he was more focused on the storm brewing in his mind than the glittering view. His shoulders, rigid with stress, spoke volumes. He was a man burdened by 1,000 fears and decisions. Slowly, Camille approached, mindful that the children might overhear if they spoke too loudly. Hey, she said softly, laying a hand on his arm. I know there's a lot going on, but maybe we can do something normal today? Get the boys some clothes. Let them see the city a little. He dragged his gaze from the window. With the media hunting us like this? Camille shrugged gently, scanning his eyes for the tension she already knew was there. We can't stay holed up forever, Alex. The boys sense how worried you are. They're already uneasy. Look at them. They can't even enjoy cartoons without glancing our way to see if something's wrong. Alexander sighed, his expression wavering between gratitude and anxiety. You're right. But how? Tasha, Camille suggested. She said she'd help however she could. Maybe she can arrange something low profile, a driver who knows discreet routes, a store that'll let us in at a quiet time. She paused, fiddling with the hem of her blouse. It's important we start acting like a family, because we are one. If we keep treating the kids like they need hiding, they'll feel like a shameful secret. That last line struck him visibly. He flinched, then nodded, guilt lacing his eyes. I never want them to feel hidden, he admitted quietly. I'll talk to Tasha. He pulled out his phone, typing a quick message. After a few tense moments, it buzzed. He read, relief softening his brow. She says she can pull something together, a small upscale department store that's not too busy on weekdays. She'll work with the manager to keep the paparazzi away. Camille smiled, a flicker of hope nudging her spirits up. That's good. They reconvened in front of the sofa. The twins glanced up expectantly, pausing the cartoon with the remote. We're going somewhere? Miles asked. Alexander knelt, meeting both boys at eye level. "Yes, if you want," he said, injecting warmth into his voice. "We need to get you clothes that actually fit. Toys, too, if you see something you like. But we might have to sneak in the back entrance. Is that okay?" Miles's eyes lit up at the mention of toys. Mason, ever the cautious one, scrunched his nose. "Why do we have to sneak?" he asked, peering suspiciously at his father. Alexander's gaze flicked to Camille, then back to Mason. "Because some people want to take our pictures and bother us with questions," he said gently. "We want to avoid them so we can have a calm day. It's not anything you did wrong. Adults can just be complicated sometimes." Mason nodded slowly, seeming to accept that explanation for now. Hand in hand, the twins popped off the couch, ready for whatever adventure awaited them. They found themselves in the building's underground garage again, escorted by the same discreet driver who'd brought them from the hotel. Tasha awaited them at the car, giving the twins a quick wave. Dressed in professional but casual attire, she projected calm control. "I made some calls," she whispered to Alexander. "The press is outside your lobby, but security's handling them. We'll exit on a different level. Our store appointment is in half an hour. The manager will open a side door. No paparazzi, hopefully." Camille exhaled, genuinely grateful. "Thank you, Tasha. You're a miracle worker." Tasha offered a tired smile. "I'm just glad to help. I've known Alex a long time. Didn't expect to handle PR disasters with secret twins, but here we are." A wry note in her tone hinted at her own disbelief. Alexander gave her a brief hug. "You've saved me more times than I can count. Please keep me posted if anything blows up while we're out." Tasha nodded, stepping back as they all climbed into the SUV. Miles and Mason took seats in the middle row, each strapped carefully into brand-new booster seats Tasha had somehow acquired overnight. Alexander sat next to them, while Camille settled in the front with the driver. The tinted windows shielded them from outside eyes. As they drove through side streets, Camille noted that the city looked normal. People bustled along sidewalks, shops opened for the day, traffic honked and rolled. Not everyone was aware of the meltdown that had shattered Alexander's wedding, yet at certain intersections they spotted small clusters of reporters near high-end hotels, presumably hunting leads for the story. The driver took alternate routes, avoiding major avenues. Eventually, they pulled up behind a sleek department store, all mirrored glass and minimalist signage. Two security guards stood by an unmarked door. They waved the SUV in, ushering it toward a private loading dock. Camille's chest fluttered. It felt surreal to need such covert measures just to buy children's clothing. The driver parked. Alexander glanced at the boys, bracing himself. "Ready?" Miles nodded with excitement, while Mason stuck close to Camille. As they stepped out, Tasha's presence was reassuring. She guided them through the service entrance, a staff elevator, and into a cordoned-off section of the store that was nearly empty of customers at this hour. A slim, courteous manager greeted them with a polished smile. "Mr. Knight, Miss Johnson, welcome," she said softly, as though mindful of the hush. "We've arranged a private fitting area for the children. Please follow me." Relief washed over Camille. It all felt so elaborate, far from the modest shopping trips she'd done with the boys back home. But perhaps this was their new reality. Despite the tension, she couldn't help smiling when she saw the twins' wonder. They gazed at racks of colorful t-shirts, jeans, shoes, as if stepping into an enchanted land. They began in the children's section, picking out shirts, pants, socks, and pajamas. The boys giggled over silly graphic tees, bouncing on tiptoes with every new discovery. Alexander trailed after them, sometimes exchanging glances with Camille. He appeared a bit awed, as though realizing all he'd missed in 5 years of fatherhood. The manager discreetly kept staff from hovering, allowing the family space to explore. Meanwhile, Tasha strayed to answer calls and texts, presumably dealing with the ongoing media flurry. Camille sighed inwardly, grateful for this moment of near normalcy. If not for the knowledge of cameras waiting outside, she could pretend they were just an ordinary family on a relaxed shopping day. After gathering enough basics, they moved to a quieter corner displaying children's toys and books. The twins sprinted ahead, delighted by shiny building sets and stuffed animals. Mason's eyes fell on a plush dinosaur while Miles gravitated to a stack of coloring books. Alexander stood by, slightly unsure. He was used to business negotiations, not a toy aisle. Camille knelt beside the boys, letting them each select one toy. "We'll come back another time," she promised, not wanting to overload them or let them think they could have everything. "Baby steps," she reminded herself. Alexander observed, a tender look warming his features. "You can pick two if you want," he said gently, catching Camille's eye as though asking permission. She inclined her head and the twins immediately beamed. For a moment, the haunting memory of reporters and catastrophic weddings felt distant. This was the father side of Alexander she'd always suspected was there, hidden under corporate suits and a rigid social status. Amid the excitement, Camille suddenly noticed Tasha heading their way, her expression tense. She held a phone pressed to her ear. "Alex," she whispered urgently, "we've got a problem. A paparazzi crew spotted the SUV outside. They're trying to enter the storefront. Security is holding them off, but they're not backing down. We need to leave soon, before it becomes a scene." Camille's heart sank. Of course, this moment of peace couldn't last. Alexander nodded, brows knitting. "All right, let's just pay and get out before they break in," he muttered, frustration seeping into his tone. Quickly, they gathered the items, clothes, shoes, a few small toys, and made their way to a private register. The manager rang them up swiftly, bagging everything while glancing nervously at Tasha's phone for updates. Camille cast a concerned look at the twins, who had sensed the tension and grown quiet. "It's okay, guys," she said softly, mustering a smile. "We'll just head home now and try on your new stuff there." The word home felt tentative, yet it suited the moment. Mason nodded, hugging his plush dinosaur close. Miles clutched a coloring book, eyes darting to Alexander for reassurance. "We'll be fine," Alexander promised them, placing a comforting hand on each boy's shoulder. "Just have to avoid those people who want to bother us." They hustled back the way they came, down staff hallways and back into the loading dock. Sure enough, there were voices clamoring in the distance. "Mr. Knight, Camille, is it true you ran off? Where are the children?" they shouted. Microphone lights flashed through a partially open door. The driver already had the SUV's engine running. Tasha rushed forward, scanning the area to ensure no other reporters lurked. She waved the family in, then slammed the door shut just as a small gaggle of paparazzi rounded the corner. The tinted windows shielded the kids from the shouting. Camille felt her pulse hammer, but the driver sped out through a side gate, leaving the paparazzi behind. In the safety of the vehicle, the twins clutched their new items. Mason stuck close to Camille while Miles pressed his face to the window, watching as the store fell behind them. Alexander exhaled, loosening his grip on the seat. "I'm sorry," he told them quietly, "that it's like this." Camille patted his arm. "At least we got some essentials for the kids. We'll manage." He nodded, but she could see the worry etched on his face. She understood. Today had been just a small outing, yet it required elaborate planning and risk of intrusion. How much worse would it get if the tabloids kept spinning out stories? What if the board at Knight Innovations demanded his resignation? And what of Elizabeth's father threatening retribution? She shoved those thoughts aside. The twins needed normalcy and love, not a mother who crumpled beneath anxieties. Camille busied herself showing them the bag of clothes, pointing out which shirts might go with which pants, trying to keep their spirits light. They responded, but she noticed how their earlier excitement had dulled, overshadowed by the sudden rush to flee. Upon returning to the penthouse, Tasha ushered them in quickly, checking over her shoulder for lurking cameras. Once inside, Miles and Mason scampered off, excited to spread out their new loot and rummage through it. Camille and Alexander lingered in the entryway with Tasha, exchanging tense glances. "Any new developments?" Alexander asked, pulling his phone from his pocket. Tasha grimaced. "Your PR team is in overdrive. They say Elizabeth's people are giving interviews, painting her as the victim of your secret double life. Some tabloids are spinning the boys as illegitimate children from a gold digger ex. And your mother, well, she's on a media lockdown, but she's letting rumors swirl that you've had personal issues for a while. The stock is fluctuating, but not crashing yet." Camille felt a knot in her stomach. "So they're trying to destroy your reputation," she said quietly. "I guess that's no surprise." Alexander's face hardened. "Let them try. I'm not hiding my children just to appease them." He paused, drawing a long breath. "But I can't ignore Night Innovations. My employees depend on it. I need to address the press or the board or someone, set the record straight." Tasha nodded. "Agreed. But you'll have to do it carefully. Give a statement that acknowledges your sons but refutes the idea it was some malicious scheme. If you don't do it soon, Elizabeth's narrative might dominate." Camille's heart hammered. She imagined standing beside Alexander at a microphone, cameras rolling, while they introduced their children to a curious, critical world. Could she handle that? Could the twins? Alexander's eyes flicked toward the hallway where Miles and Mason laughed over new sneakers. "We can talk strategy soon," he told Tasha. "But for now I need to settle the kids. They've been through enough." Tasha nodded, patting his arm. "Take your time. I'll handle what I can." She offered Camille a small smile of encouragement, then departed. In the ensuing silence, Alexander lowered his head. Camille slipped an arm around his waist, offering quiet solidarity. She felt his tension melt slightly against her. "We'll do it," she murmured. "Whatever it takes to protect them. Even if that means a press conference or legal battles or dealing with your mother's wrath." He exhaled. "Thank you," he whispered. "I'm sorry. For everything." She gazed at him, a mix of relief and lingering apprehension in her heart. "No," she replied gently. "Thank you for choosing them, and for letting me in." They stayed like that, side by side, long enough for the weight of the moment to settle. In the background, the twins' laughter echoed, an unexpected reminder that children could find joy even in turmoil. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to keep them going. Later that afternoon, the penthouse felt almost peaceful, at least on the surface. The twins busied themselves constructing elaborate towers from the new building blocks they'd picked out, occasionally erupting in cheerful chatter whenever one sibling's creation toppled over. Their unfiltered delight left the adults hovering between hope and heartbreak. In the living room, Alexander and Camille sat on the sofa, his laptop balanced on the glass coffee table in front of them. Tasha's messages glowed on the screen, along with a relentless feed of headlines from various news outlets. The words on the screen blurred in Camille's mind. Knight's wedding catastrophe. Secret twins emerge. Millionaire CEO abandons bride for unknown children. Each link led to another scorching analysis of the fiasco. Alexander, tense and exhausted, rubbed at his temples. "We have to put out a statement," he said quietly. "I can't keep ignoring this. My board is going ballistic, shareholders are panicking, and the press is spinning theories like it's free candy." Camille scooted closer, peering at his laptop. "What exactly do they want you to say?" He shrugged, frustration evident. "Something that sounds responsible, mitigating the scandal. If I don't get ahead of it, Elizabeth's family will control the narrative. They're already painting me as a reckless liar who deceived her right up to the altar." She laced her fingers, heart thumping. "The truth is we both made mistakes," she murmured. "But we're here now, raising the twins together, or at least trying to." Alexander glanced toward the boys, who were now half hidden behind the sofa, racing toy cars along the floor. "We are," he echoed softly, "but the media doesn't care about nuance. They want a neat villain or victim. Camille contemplated the swirl of public intrigue. Videos from the failed wedding had undoubtedly gone viral, paparazzi photos capturing Alexander holding the boys or kneeling with them on the rooftop. She wondered if any shot showed his torn expression, the raw heartbreak that told of a father finally meeting his children under impossible circumstances. Probably not. Sensational stories rarely spare room for empathy. She rested a hand on his forearm. Why not release a simple statement first, just acknowledging that the children are yours and you only learned about them recently? Emphasize you're devoted to their well-being now. Keep it concise. Don't fuel rumors. Alexander's shoulders relaxed marginally. That might work as a starting point, he admitted. But the board will want more. They'll want me to reassure investors that Knight Innovations remains stable, that the meltdown with Elizabeth's father won't cripple our future. A humorless chuckle slipped out, which is tricky considering how vital that merger was. She bit her lip, feeling a pang of guilt. Is there any chance to salvage it? She asked tentatively. Or is it gone for good? He sighed. Elizabeth's father is furious. He's calling every contact, stirring negativity. But some of my loyal investors might stand by me if I show strong leadership. The real question is whether we can find a new partner or pivot to a different expansion plan. He flexed his jaw. I've put all that on hold for now, though. The kids come first. I just hope it doesn't lead to a complete collapse. Camille squeezed his arm. You won't face it alone. We'll figure out a strategy. The vow tumbled from her lips unbidden, but she felt its truth. They were irrevocably bound by the twins, by the sudden shift in Alexander's life. She couldn't run again. The door buzzer chimed in a short burst, and both of them tensed. Had someone from the press managed to get in? Alexander frowned, exchanging a wary look with Camille before rising to check the front screen security feed. The tension in his face eased. It's Tasha, he said, pressing the button to unlock the elevator access. She must have some update. Moments later, Tasha stepped out, her face alight with a mixture of urgency and relief. She crossed to the sofa, greeting the twins with a quick ruffle of their curls as they peeked at her from behind a throw pillow, then turned to Alexander and Camille. Bad news and slightly less bad news, she announced in a low voice. Which do you want first? Alexander half laughed, the sound hoarse. Let's have it in whatever order. Tasha settled onto the edge of a nearby chair. Bad news. Senator Grant is threatening a lawsuit, claiming you committed fraud by hiding your children from Elizabeth. It's probably baseless legally, but the PR damage is huge. He's got a few unscrupulous media outlets running wild with it. Camille's stomach twisted. Fraud? He didn't even know about the twins. Tasha raised a placating hand. I know, it's ridiculous, but he's pulling strings to smear Alex. Pressure from that might scare potential investors more. Alexander pinched the bridge of his nose. Figures. And the slightly less bad news? Tasha pursed her lips. Some board members are calling an urgent meeting. They're demanding a statement from you ASAP, possibly a press conference. They want to see if you'll keep your position as CEO or step aside. There's talk of bringing in a crisis manager, someone to help handle the brand damage. Camille sucked in a sharp breath. Step aside. Would they force you out? Alexander grimaced. They can try if they claim I'm causing irreparable harm to the company's image. But Knight Innovations was basically my father's legacy, then mine. I'm not giving it up without a fight. Tasha nodded approvingly. Good. The board meeting is tomorrow morning. It'll be private, but they'll want you to address the scandal publicly soon after. They're pushing for an official statement or interview. Alexander's eyes flicked to Camille. She read the question in them. Are we ready for that? Could they handle stepping in front of the world to defend their new family? She inhaled, pulse pounding. If that's what it takes, she said, voice trembling slightly, I'd rather face them than let rumors define our story. Tasha placed a hand on Camille's shoulder. That's brave, But you should know it'll be an onslaught of scrutiny. They'll dig into your past, your finances, everything." Camille's stomach lurched. She thought of her small design business overseas, now on the brink of collapse, her fleeting jobs to stay afloat, the quiet life she'd tried to build for the twins. None of it seemed scandalous, but the media could warp anything. Yet she refused to let fear control her. "Let them," she said, lifting her chin. "I have nothing to hide." Alexander exhaled, admiration mingling with concern in his gaze. "Then we do this as a team. I'll talk to the board tomorrow, reassure them I've got the company under control. After that, we make a public statement that sets the record straight." Tasha gave a crisp nod, though her eyes shone with support. "You'll need to prepare, and maybe consider a calmer environment for the kids if the press gets too intense." She paused, lowering her voice. "You sure you want them with you in front of the cameras?" Alexander hesitated, looking over to where Miles and Mason busily arranged toy cars. "I don't want them paraded like trophies, but I also don't want to pretend they don't exist." He cast Camille a pained glance. "What do you think?" She closed her eyes briefly. "They're already part of the story. Hiding them might make it look like we're ashamed. But maybe we can just keep them close by, not necessarily on stage. Let them appear briefly so everyone sees they're real children, not some twisted rumor. Then shield them from the more brutal parts." He nodded, relief and dread colliding in his face. "That sounds reasonable." Tasha rose. "I'll help coordinate. We'll find a safe venue for the press conference, maybe next door to the Night Innovations building. Limited invites, security tight." She pressed a few keys on her phone. "Meanwhile, I suggest you both rest. Keep the kids comfortable. The next 24 hours are going to be intense." After Tasha departed, silence stretched through the penthouse. Miles and Mason, sensing the shift in mood, tiptoed over. "Mommy, are you sad?" Mason asked, noticing the tension etched on her face. Camille forced a reassuring smile. "I'm a little worried, but not about you. You and your brother are doing great. It's just grown-up stuff." Alexander knelt next to them, ruffling Miles's hair. "We might have to go to a meeting tomorrow," he explained in a gentle tone. "Some grown-ups want us to talk about how we're all a family. But we'll make sure you two are safe. You won't be alone, I promise." Miles's eyes went wide. "Like a TV show?" he asked, perplexed. "Sort of," Camille said. "Lots of people will be watching, but we just want them to hear the truth, that you two deserve a dad who loves you." The twins nodded solemnly, though clearly not grasping the adult ramifications. Still, they clung to Alexander's every word with an unguarded trust that made Camille's heart ache. Dinner time came and went in a blur. They ordered takeout, sitting around the penthouse's modern dining table, a quiet meal punctuated by timid talk of what the twins might do tomorrow. Camille tried to keep it casual. "After the press meeting, maybe we'll grab lunch somewhere calm or come back for a movie." She noticed how Alexander forced a light-heartedness in his tone for the boys even though tension thrummed beneath. Once the children were in bed, tucked into their newly furnished suite, the door left ajar in case they called out, Camille joined Alexander in the living room. City lights glowed through the broad windows, painting everything in hushed tones. He sank onto the sofa, letting his head fall back. She sat beside him, unspoken worries hanging between them. "How are you holding up?" she asked softly. He let out a harsh laugh, eyes closed. "Ask me that tomorrow, when I'm facing the board. I might still get ousted for reckless personal conduct. I deserve it in some ways, but—" He frowned, shaking his head. "I don't regret acknowledging the twins. I just hate that it's turned into a feeding frenzy." Camille reached for his hand. "They're worth it," she said, voice trembling with quiet conviction. "No matter what happens with the company, or the press, or even your mother, the twins come first. I know it's devastating to see all your plans unravel, but this new plan, being a dad, can be better than anything." He turned his hand to clasp hers. "I hope so," he murmured, finally meeting her gaze. In his eyes she saw gratitude, fear, something like yearning. It reminded her of the nights they once spent dreaming of a simpler future. Back then they had been naive, ignoring how his wealthy world could devour them. A faint beep from his phone broke the moment. He checked the screen, another barrage of messages. "It's Tasha," he said, scanning them. "She's confirming the location for tomorrow. The board meeting first, then a quick press conference. She also says we'll have armed security stationed outside in case things get rough." Camille swallowed. Armed security. This is so unreal. He nodded gravely. "I know, but it's our reality now." His gaze flicked down the hallway toward the children's room. "I'll do whatever it takes to keep them safe." A moment's hush followed, the penthouse seeming too large, too still. Camille searched for words to cushion the dread. "At least we can face it together," she said at last, her voice steady. "I'm not running away this time." His grip tightened on her hand, eyes misting with emotion. "Thank you," he whispered again. I wish we hadn't lost 5 years. But I'm so glad you're here now." The city lights glimmered on their faces as they lingered, comforted by the warmth in each other's presence. Tomorrow's battle loomed, but for one more night, they allowed themselves the fragile solace of unity. In the hallway, 2 sleeping boys represented every reason they had to fight. And together, they silently vowed, no matter how fierce the oncoming storm, they wouldn't let this family be torn apart again. Sunrise found the penthouse steeped in hush. The twins were still sleeping, tangled together in their new bunk bed. Yes, Alexander had indeed arranged it overnight, wanting to give them a surprise they would wake to. Now just a faint glow of morning light reflected off the glass towers outside, creeping into every corner of the plush suite. Camille stood in the kitchen, dressed in a simple blouse and pencil skirt that she'd managed to salvage from her limited wardrobe. Her heart pounded with a mix of nerves and resolve. Today was the day. Alexander would face his company's board of directors, and afterward they'd stand together publicly for the first time. A press conference, cameras clicking, journalists demanding answers. The very thought made her lightheaded. She looked up as Alexander entered, still pulling on the cuffs of a crisp dress shirt, his suit jacket draped over one arm. Gone was the casual attire of the day before. He now wore the mantle of a CEO heading into battle. His face, however, showed raw vulnerability under that polished exterior. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked quietly, pouring him a cup of coffee. He let out a taut breath, accepting the mug. "Hardly," he said, voice tight. "I kept thinking about all the possible outcomes. The board might force me out, demand I temporarily step aside until the scandal dies down. And the press—" He broke off, eyes clouding. "If I lose the company, how do I provide stability for the twins? I have to be strong today, but I'm so tired." Camille laid a gentle hand on his wrist. "You're not alone. Remember that, okay? No matter what the board says, the twins have you, and that's the real victory." His eyes flicked up, a ghost of a smile tugging at his lips. "Thanks," he murmured, draining a gulp of coffee. They both turned at the sound of soft, pattering feet. Miles and Mason trudged in, pajamas askew, hair ruffled with sleep. Their eyes lit up when they spotted Alexander's suit, a novelty after the previous day's casual father figure. "Are you going to work, Daddy?" Miles asked, half yawning. Alexander set down his coffee, kneeling to greet them. "Yes," he said gently. "I have a big meeting, but after that, Mommy and I might have to talk on camera for a bit. Remember how we said we'd tell everyone the truth so they don't make up lies about us?" Mason nodded, face scrunching in that serious way he had. "Will it be scary?" Camille's chest squeezed. She knelt beside them. "It might feel that way, but we'll keep you close. No one's going to hurt you. There might just be a lot of cameras and questions." Miles sidled up to Alexander, slipping a small hand into his. Can we watch cartoons again when we're done? The innocence in that question nearly undid Camille. So many adult problems swirled around them, yet at heart they were just two little boys seeking normalcy. Alexander mustered a real smile, ruffling Miles's hair. "Absolutely," he said. "We'll come home, have lunch, and watch cartoons, okay?" The boys beamed. Camille gently coaxed them to the dining area, where she served a quick breakfast. Alexander answered another flurry of texts, face pinching with tension each time the phone buzzed. Tasha's updates indicated the board was already gathering downtown. The press had congregated outside the Night Innovations building, hungry for any glimpse of the disgraced groom and his mysterious family. Camille methodically brushed the twins' hair, choosing their outfits, casual but neat, to help them appear calm and cared for in front of prying eyes. She tried to quell her own anxiety, focusing on their morning routine, reminding them to chew thoroughly and wash their faces. By 8:30, they were all in the private elevator descending to the underground garage. Tasha waited by a sleek sedan, hair pulled into a no-nonsense bun, her phone glued to her ear as she finalized last-minute details. Bodyguards, two tall, suited individuals, stood discreetly nearby. It jolted Camille to realize they needed bodyguards, but after yesterday's near encounter with paparazzi, she couldn't deny it was prudent. They settled into the sedan, Alexander and Camille on either side of the twins, Tasha in the passenger seat, the bodyguards following in a second vehicle. The tension was palpable. "Let's do the meeting first," Tasha briefed them. "We'll keep the kids in a safe conference room away from the board's arguments. Then we'll head to the press conference venue next door. There'll be a small stage and a few dozen reporters. Nothing too massive." Alexander nodded, jaw set. "That's manageable." The drive downtown felt longer than it was, maybe because each block brought them closer to the building that might become his personal battlefield. As they approached, Camille noticed clusters of photographers, news vans, and gawkers near the Night Innovations skyscraper. Tasha's arrangement with security allowed them to enter via a back entrance, but not even that would hide the swarm of camera flashes going off in the distance. Inside the building's private garage, Alexander paused, turning to the twins. "All right, guys," he said gently, crouching to their level. "You'll go with Mommy and Miss Tasha to a nice office. There are some toys, maybe some snacks. I'll be in a big meeting room for a while." Mason's brow furrowed. "You'll come back, right?" Alexander's throat bobbed. "I promise," he whispered. "I'll come back for you." Miles and Mason nodded, still clinging to him. Eventually, Tasha led them toward a secure elevator. Alexander kissed each boy's forehead, his voice raw with emotion, then stepped onto a separate elevator heading to the executive floor. Camille felt her heart twist watching him go, tension etched onto every line of his face. An hour passed in a private lounge, Tasha anxiously pacing while Camille tried to keep the twins occupied with crayons and paper. Every so often, Tasha would touch the phone earpiece, getting whispered updates. "The board is grilling him. They're worried about share value. Some are demanding an apology to the grants." At one point, Tasha murmured, "He's pushing back, telling them the children matter more than the merger." Camille's pulse raced. She'd expected nothing less from Alexander. He was a father now. But what would that cost him? Finally, near 10 o'clock, the door opened to reveal Alexander, flanked by two stern-looking board members. He looked exhausted, but a spark of determination flared in his eyes. As soon as the twins spotted him, they jumped up, rushing over. He scooped them into his arms, breathing relief. One board member, a man in his 60s with a graying mustache, cleared his throat. "Alexander," he said evenly, glancing at Camille and the boys, "we've come to a decision. The board will not call for your immediate removal, on the condition that you manage this public scandal responsibly. Rebuild confidence. That starts with today's press statement." He glanced meaningfully at Tasha. "Keep it tasteful." Alexander nodded stiffly. "I will. Thank you for understanding." The second board member, a woman with sharp features, frowned. Not all of us are pleased, Mr. Knight. If stock prices continue to dip, we may revisit this. But for now, we'll stand behind you, provided you protect the company's image moving forward." With that, the two executives left, letting the door thud shut behind them. Alexander gently set the twins down, exhaling a shaky sigh. "They grilled me for an hour about how I destroyed the Knight-Grant alliance," he said grimly. "But in the end, they see I'm still the best chance they have, or maybe they're giving me enough rope to hang myself. Either way, I have to prove I can keep it together." Camille laid a hand on his shoulder. "You can," she said firmly. Tasha stepped up, phone in hand. "We need to head to the conference room next door. Reporters are already waiting. Are you guys ready?" Camille's heart lurched. Ready to face the press? Her mind reeled, but the twins gazed at her with such trusting innocence. They deserved a real father, and if facing a sea of cameras was necessary, so be it. "Let's do it," she whispered. They traversed another corridor under guard, eventually arriving at a mid-size auditorium set aside for corporate events. Tasha peeked through a side door, rows of seats, a podium with Knight Innovations emblem, a scattering of cameras at the back. She held up a hand for them to wait, then slipped inside to check the setup. After a minute, she re-emerged. "Okay," Tasha breathed, eyes skimming Camille, Alexander, then the boys. "We've arranged seating up front near the podium. Alexander, you'll make a statement, talk about the kids, your plan for the company. Camille, at some point they might ask you a question. If you feel comfortable, speak up. If not, you can just confirm the basics." Camille swallowed, glancing at Alexander. His expression was resolute, though tense. "We'll keep it brief," he said. "No sensational details, just the truth." Mason and Miles each gripped one of Camille's hands, uncertain and wide-eyed. She knelt between them, voice gentle. "There might be flashing lights, people might shout questions, but you just stay close to me and Daddy, understand?" They nodded, clutching their plush dinosaur and coloring book respectively, their small security items. Alexander released a slow breath. "Let's go." Tasha led them into the conference room. A low hum of conversation immediately spiked as they stepped into view. About 24 reporters, photographers, and maybe a couple of video crews were arranged in rows. Their faces lit with a feeding frenzy excitement at seeing Alexander Knight emerge with two curly-haired little boys and a poised, anxious woman by his side. Flashes popped, murmurs soared. Tasha guided them to a simple table next to the podium. Camille helped the twins settle on chairs. Too big for their small frames, but at least it gave them a physical perch to cling to. Alexander stepped up to the microphone. The hush deepened, every lens focusing on him. "Good morning," he began, voice calm despite the tension in his stance. "I'm Alexander Knight, CEO of Knight Innovations. I realize many of you have questions regarding recent events, specifically the cancellation of my wedding and the revelation that I have two young sons." Quiet gasps, scrawling of notes, camera shutters clicking. Camille felt her pulse hammer. She forced a comforting smile at the boys, who gazed at their father with rapt attention. Alexander paused, scanning the room. "First and foremost, I want to acknowledge that I learned of my children's existence only recently, on what was supposed to be my wedding day. Their mother, Camille Johnson, made the decision years ago to raise them without my knowledge for reasons that are private and tied to personal fears and misunderstandings." His eyes flicked to Camille, a hint of regret there, then returned to the cameras. "I do not blame her. If there's any fault, it's mine for not creating an environment where she felt safe coming forward sooner." A ripple went through the room. Camille's heart clenched, touched by his willingness to shoulder blame for circumstances out of his control. She tried to keep her breathing steady. Alexander continued, voice resonating. "I have two wonderful sons, Miles and Mason, and I intend to be the father they deserve. Regardless of what happened with my former fiancée, Elizabeth Grant, or the business partnership between Knight Innovations and the Grant family, I will not hide my children." A reporter raised a hand, voice insistent. "Mr. Knight, were you deceptive to the Grant family about these children? Did you destroy that merger by—" Alexander lifted a hand, quiet authority in his gesture. "I was not deceptive. I had no idea of their existence until hours before the ceremony. Ms. Grant is entitled to her feelings, but this situation arose from incomplete information, not malice. My decision to end the wedding was mutual with her once it was clear my children would not be accepted." A flurry of camera clicks. Another journalist stood, calling out, "Are you seeking a paternity test? How can we be sure these boys are really yours?" Alexander's jaw tightened. "We've performed private DNA confirmation, yes. There's no question they're mine. Beyond that, any medical details are private." More calls erupted, the atmosphere teetering on a frenzy. Tasha, stationed at the side, stepped in. "One at a time," she said sharply, holding up a hand. Camille's stomach churned. She glanced at the twins. Mason's grip on his stuffed dinosaur had tightened, while Miles hunkered down behind the coloring book. She slid her hands to their shoulders, murmuring reassurance. A female reporter, her tone softer, addressed Camille. "Ms. Johnson, why did you wait so long to reveal the children? Do you have any comment on rumors calling you a gold digger?" The spotlight shifted, eyes and cameras pivoting toward Camille. Her pulse roared in her ears, but she forced calm. Clearing her throat, she rose slightly, voice trembling at first. I understand the curiosity, but I never sought Alexander's fortune. I left because I felt inadequate, and circumstances convinced me it was best for the twins to live away from the spotlight. Financially, I managed on my own. I only returned when I had no choice. My business failed, and the boys deserved to know their father." Alexander's hand found hers beneath the table, giving a gentle squeeze. Another hush. Then the same reporter pressed, "Is it true you arrived on his wedding day on purpose to force his hand?" Camille lifted her chin. "No, my timing was horrible, I know. But I had just learned he was getting married, and I couldn't bear letting that happen without giving him the chance to know about his sons. It wasn't a scheme. It was desperation." A murmur of thoughtful commentary rumbled through the press. Tasha, seeing the momentum, decided to wrap up. "We'll take one more question. Then Mr. Knight and Ms. Johnson need to return to their family." A bespectacled man at the back rose. "Mr. Knight, how will this scandal affect Knight Innovations? Do you plan to resign?" Alexander squared his shoulders, projecting a confidence Camille admired. "I have no intention of resigning. My focus will remain on leading Knight Innovations effectively. The board and I are aligned in moving forward, despite personal upheavals. My personal life may have changed dramatically, but my commitment to the company remains." He paused, scanning the throng. "That's all for now. Thank you for respecting our privacy going forward, especially for my sons. We appreciate your understanding." Tasha stepped forward, escorting them away from the podium amidst a crescendo of follow-up questions. The twins, wide-eyed and overwhelmed, clung to Camille and Alexander, who shielded them from the cameras as best they could. Bodyguards flanked them, guiding them through a side exit. Once outside the building, the swirl of adrenaline left Camille's knees weak. She hopped into the waiting car, helping the twins settle in. Alexander slid in beside her, breathing heavily as though he'd run a marathon. Tasha climbed into the front passenger seat, exhaling in relief. "You did great," Tasha said, twisting to face them. "That could have been a feeding frenzy, but you kept it on your terms." Alexander nodded, gaze shifting to the boys. "You two okay?" he asked gently. Miles nodded, pressing close to Camille. Mason clutched his dinosaur, eyes still wide. "That was scary," he admitted. Camille stroked his hair. "It's over now, honey. We're going home." Alexander caught her gaze, a flicker of relief and gratitude in his eyes. They had braved the storm's first wave, telling their truth to the world. The questions would continue, rumors would swirl, but at least they hadn't let fear silence them. As the car pulled away from the Knight Innovations building, Camille clutched Alexander's hand. The children nestled against them, seeking reassurance, and though the future remained uncertain, for that one moment, they felt like a real family, united against whatever challenges lay ahead. Back in the penthouse, the atmosphere was subdued yet markedly lighter. The press conference was over, and though Camille could practically feel the swirl of public speculation intensifying outside, it was a relief to finally have said their piece. Miles and Mason clung to Alexander on the ride home, but brightened once they stepped off the elevator, remembering the bunk beds and new toys waiting in their room. "I'll get them a snack," Camille suggested softly, noticing how Mason, in particular, seemed subdued. It had been an emotional day. He needed something comforting and normal. Alexander nodded, carrying Miles, while Mason trotted alongside, still clutching his dinosaur as though it were a shield. In the kitchen, Camille busied herself with cutting fresh fruit and preparing small sandwiches. The twins plopped onto the bar stools, wide-eyed but calmer. They peppered her with questions. Why so many people took pictures? Why grown-ups asked so many questions? Would there be more shouting or flashing lights? Camille explained gently that the cameras would probably be around for a while, but they would do their best to keep the boys safe. Alexander hovered nearby, discarding his jacket and tie with visible relief. He rolled up his shirt sleeves, leaning against the counter. When Camille finished plating the snacks, he reached out and took one of her hands. "Thank you," he said in a low voice, glancing at Miles and Mason to ensure they weren't paying too much attention. "You were so composed in there and honest. It helped me more than you know." She squeezed his hand. "We did it together. And the boys were so brave." As if on cue, Mason piped up, "I was brave, right?" He smiled around a mouthful of strawberries. Camille ruffled his hair. "The bravest," she said, her heart warming at the sight of his bashful grin. They spent the next hour unwinding, watching a silly cartoon, letting the children run around the living room and pick out which t-shirts to try on next. Alexander occasionally checked his phone for messages from Tasha, the board, or staff, but he stayed firmly grounded in the moment, reluctant to let more business distractions tear him away from his newly claimed family. As evening descended, the cityscape beyond the penthouse windows sparkled with countless lights, a glittering ocean of possibilities and challenges. The twins, exhausted from the day, curled up in their bunk beds. Camille read them a short story. Miles insisted on showing Alexander each picture, while Mason quietly leaned on Camille's shoulder. When they finally drifted off, Alexander and Camille slipped out of the room, leaving a soft nightlight glowing. In the dimly lit hallway, he caught her hand. "Walk with me?" he asked softly. She nodded, pulse fluttering. They meandered to the penthouse's floor-to-ceiling windows, gazing out at the metropolis that had shaped Alexander's life and now threatened to scrutinize every aspect of their new family dynamic. He slid a hand around her waist, pulling her gently closer. For a few moments, they watched the city in silence. Then Alexander let out a quiet sigh, as though the stress he'd carried for days was pressing down on him all at once. "It's strange," he said. "I used to think my biggest worries revolved around mergers and shareholder demands. Now I realize none of that compares to wanting the best for Miles and Mason." Camille turned to face him, catching the faint reflection of city lights in his eyes. "They're your heart," she said softly. "Everything else becomes secondary." A weak laugh escaped him. "Exactly. And yet I can't abandon Knight Innovations. I want to preserve what my father built. But I don't want to lose these boys to the ugliness of press scrutiny, or lose us." Camille's heart jumped at that last word. Us. Her cheeks warmed. They hadn't explicitly talked about rekindling anything romantic, yet over the last 2 days they'd slipped into a sort of emotional intimacy that felt very close to the love they once knew. Now, the unspoken question lay between them. Could they truly be a family in every sense of the word? She reached up, laying a palm gently on his cheek. I can't promise the headlines will vanish overnight or that the board won't try something drastic. But the four of us, we can handle it, one day at a time, if we're together." His breath caught. Slowly, he leaned in, pressing his forehead to hers. "I want that," he whispered. "I want you here. Not because of guilt or obligation, but because—" His voice faltered with a surge of emotion. "Because part of me never stopped loving you." A quiver coursed through Camille's entire being. Memories flashed. The nights of laughter, the dreams they once shared, followed by the betrayal and heartbreak that led her to flee. But none of it overshadowed the pull she still felt for him, especially now after seeing his determination to be a father. She swallowed, eyes shining. I feel the same," she admitted, voice trembling. "I just never thought we could find our way back after so much time apart and so many mistakes." Alexander's hand rose to cradle her face. His gaze was intent, breath unsteady. "We're not the people we were, and maybe that's good. We've grown. We have two incredible children who need us. We can build something real with truth at the core." Tears pricked her eyes. She nodded, slipping her arms around his neck. "Yes," she whispered. Then, with a softness born of relief and 1,000 unspoken longings, she leaned in to kiss him. It was gentle at first, tentative, both of them unsure if it was truly allowed, if they deserved this quiet moment of connection. But the tenderness soon gave way to a more determined warmth. He slid his hands around her waist, pulling her closer. A small gasp escaped her lips, quickly lost in the mingling of their breaths. When they finally broke apart, they remained close, noses touching. Outside, the city's glow cast silhouettes of two people who had traversed heartbreak and scandal, finding each other again amid the ruins of a wedding that never happened. Camille pressed a shaky laugh against his shoulder. "I have no idea how we'll navigate everything. The board, your mother, the tabloids, but I want to try." He laughed softly too, relief and joy dancing in his eyes. "We'll figure it out, and if the headlines scream for a while, let them. We have each other and the boys. That's more than enough." They lingered there at the window, the pulse of the city merging with the steady drum of their intertwined hearts. In the background, faintly, Camille thought she heard a small rustle, perhaps Mason stirring in bed or Miles rolling over. Neither child emerged, but the knowledge of them nearby kept the moment grounded in purpose. This time, when Alexander shifted, he did so with a smile that met his eyes. "Let's sit," he said, guiding her to a chaise lounge by the window. They settled, side by side, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her. For a long while, they spoke in hushed tones, small admissions about fears, half-formed plans for the future. Alexander mused about reorienting Knight Innovations away from the ill-fated partnership with Elizabeth's family, hoping to forge alliances with businesses that wouldn't hold his personal life hostage. Camille vowed to find her footing again with her design work, possibly opening a modest studio in the city now that she had Alexander's support. They talked about the twins, about enrolling them in a local school where they might find friends and stability, about transforming the penthouse to accommodate children's chaos and curiosity, about how to shield them from the nastiest corners of the press. Laughter occasionally escaped them at the thought of two rambunctious little boys bounding around these sleek, polished floors. Eventually, the conversation lulled into a contented silence. Camille closed her eyes, letting the steady rhythm of Alexander's breathing soothe her. She realized she felt more at peace than she had in years, despite the storm swirling outside. Secrets were laid bare, their children were asleep in safety, and hope sprouted in the cracks left by heartbreak. On the horizon, the lights of the city glimmered like a promise that tomorrow wouldn't be simple, but it would be theirs to shape, together. In that hush, Alexander pressed a feather-light kiss to Camille's temple. "Thank you for giving me my sons," he whispered, voice thick with emotion, "and for letting me show them the kind of father I can be." Tears welled in her eyes, but her smile was radiant. "Thank you," she murmured back, "for choosing them and for opening your heart to us again." No more words were needed. They remained in each other's arms, gazing at a future they hadn't dared to imagine. Down the hallway, two little boys slept in bunk beds, wholly unaware that their arrival had changed everything for the better. And across the city, headlines might scream, alliances might falter, but within these walls, a family was finding its way toward love, courage, and the home they all deserved. If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Just click on the screen